Chapter 1385. However, Dongfeng Xingchen saw that his father's expression was unusually sour while Palace Lord Shimin Fengfu's gaze towards him was even more complicated, mixed with an inexplicable glint. What was going on? Father, Uncle Shimin. Dongfeng Xingchen bowed respectfully, his movements returning to normal. However, he could clearly feel his head buzzing. A few of his teeth seemed to have fallen out, and there was a thick taste of blood in his mouth. Who knocked me out? It must be that bastard Yun Yang. Yun Yang, you'd asterisk Ned brat. Just you wait. Now that my father and Senior Shimin are gathered here, you'll die for sure. Dongfeng Howren's expression was dark as he said, Tell me what you've been doing all this time one by one. Dongfeng Xingchen thought of something and replied, Yes. Dongfeng Xingchen had prepared a script in an instant. In fact, he had already prepared a reply to his father and the other two palace lords after he had killed Yun Yang. He could say that Yun Yang had died in the hands of his enemies due to enmity, or that Yun Yang was young and arrogant, provoking jealousy and being schemed against by those who envied him. He could also say that Yun Yang had Ji Lingxi and Shangguan Lingxiu's beauty and desire to kill him as soon as he knew that Yun Yang had two beauties at the same time. He even had an excuse for inciting Ning Fengxue. Yun Yang's murderous aura was too strong and arrogant, so Senior Ning wanted to teach him a lesson, but Yun Yang was unruly and Senior Ning could not stop himself. Although each reason was just for show, it was definitely acceptable for a worthless dead man. At least, it was enough for Dongfeng Xingchen. What Dongfeng Xingchen wanted to do now was to magnify Yun Yang's arrogance, ruthlessness, and insanity. At least, he wanted to make his stance against Yun Yang a talking point. However, as the two shocking auras came crashing down, Dongfeng Xingchen was completely stunned. Dongfeng Howren and Shimin Fengfu looked at him with their four eyes and said in a chilling voice, Do not hide anything. Dongfeng Xingchen only felt his mind go blurry, as though he was lost in the boundless starry sky. In that moment, his heart was in a trance, as though he could not even think straight. Everything he said came from his heart. Ever since we came to Tonight City. His expression was wooden as he narrated like flowing water. He described everything in detail without any mistakes or omissions, nor did he say anything that was not true. How did he arrange it? How did he assassinate Yun Yang? How did the others discuss it with him? How did they set up the trap? How did they come up with excuses? How did they plan to wipe out the residents of Nine Supremes and the residents of Ninth Supremes? Once it was destroyed, how would the power be divided? How would the wealth be divided? And who would own Ji Lingxi and the other beauties? What did Yu Zhenxiao say? What did Shimin Huanyu say? What did Beigong Wushuang say? How did the Sons of Holy Lands discuss? How did they go from fighting on their own in the beginning to all the Sons of Holy Lands deciding to work together to target Yun Yang? Until today, when Beigong Wushuang had gone to test Yun Yang for some unknown reason, he had been hunted down by Yun Yang instead. Then, Beigong Wushuang had been killed by Yun Yang in front of them and had even pointed the finger at them. Naturally, they were unwilling to sit still and wait for their deaths, so they had retaliated. After that, how did Yun Yang erupt? How did he go on a killing spree? Finally, how did he and Yu Zhenxiao escape? How were they hunted down by Yun Yang? And how did they do it? What Dongfeng Xingchen could not understand the most was how Yun Yang had managed to escape when he had asked Ning Fengxue to personally deal with Yun Yang. How was it possible? The more Dongfeng Howren listened, the uglier his expression became, and his breathing grew heavier. In the end, he was already breathing like a bellow. Shimin Fafu heard his son, Shimin Huanyu, say, Although Supreme Cloud is the continent's hero, as long as we deny his identity, we can naturally kill him and not leave any loose ends. We have so many witnesses on our side, we can still say whatever we want. History books have always been written by the victors. Who would stand up for a dead man? At most, we will create an illusion and point the finger at the demon race. I believe the demon race will be more than happy to take the blame. After he finished speaking, his already ashen face turned even uglier. When he heard how they would split the wealth and beauties, and so on, the two palace lords felt their hearts wrench in pain. How did we educate such a bunch of trash? What kind of F***king trash are they? As Dongfeng Xingchen went deeper, Shimin Fafu's gaze towards Dongfeng Howren was filled with sympathy, as if they were in the same boat. As for his gaze towards Dongfeng Xingchen, it was no longer complicated, but filled with pity. Silly child. Your father definitely doesn't want to kill you. But every time you speak, you take another step forward on the road to the netherworld. You are still going on, and you still haven't finished speaking. Pitiful old Dongfang. You will also have to face the pain of losing your son. Luckily, this daddy's men are all dead. Otherwise, thinking of this, Shimin Fafu felt an indescribable sense of relief. He was confused by his own feelings. F***ck, my son and disciples are all dead, and I am still rejoicing. This reaction is not normal. After listening to Dongfang Xingchen's story, Dongfang Haoren's originally gloomy face turned pale. His body swayed in despair as he asked in a low voice, "As a holy son, you should have your own considerations. But facing the continent's hero, other than getting rid of him, don't you have any other thoughts?" Dongfang Xingchen's face was wooden, but his voice was calm. Hero is just a title, and the so-called achievements are just legends. When I become the Palace Lord of the Sky Palace in the future, no matter how many heroes I want to create, it will just be a matter of a word. Heroes have always been tools for those in power to win over the hearts of the people, and to stimulate the world. Why do I need any other thoughts? It was not only Dongfang Haoren who heard this. Even Shimin Fafu's eyes widened. This was a hero who had bled and sacrificed his life for humanity, for the race. The backbone of the entire human race. This fellow had such an attitude towards the heroes of the human race. No, not only him, all the fallen holy sons probably had the same attitude. Otherwise, how could they have gathered together and worked together? Shimin Fafu suddenly interrupted. The hero you speak of, is it only Yun Yang, or all the heroes? His voice was awe-inspiring. Dongfang Xingchen answered without hesitation. Only the dead deserve to be called a hero. Yun Yang has earned the title of a hero as a living man. So why shouldn't he die? Only a worthless dead man can be praised as a hero. Besides, a hero only leaves behind a pile of wealth, waiting for others to divide it. His descendants will never be able to keep the family business anyway. It will only benefit those in power like us. Even if he is a hero, as long as he is dead, what value does he have? Who would be willing to stand up for him? This kind of thing is too safe. Shimin Fafu chuckled coldly and said, "Truly the scheming of an emperor. Dongfang, you taught him well." Dongfang Haoren's face darkened. Dongfang Xingchen said lightly, "Shimin Huanyu and I have the same thoughts." Shimin Fafu's face darkened as well. Right now, Dongfang Xingchen was completely shaken, and his thoughts were the most honest reactions. Hearing him say this, Shimin Fafu's heart turned cold. Dongfang Haoren's expression changed again, an ominous thought rising in his mind. Closing his eyes, he asked with a hopeless heart, "From what you've said, you've done something to the previous heroes of the human race?" Dongfang Xingchen was still in a state of extreme shock, replying woodenly, "Such benefits, it would be a waste not to take them. 50 years ago, Yang Shengjun, who was sacrificed at the Blood Soul Mountain, had a beautiful girl in his bloodline family. I wanted to take her as a concubine, but the Yang family was actually not willing. They did not know how to appreciate favors, and their entire family was slaughtered. That girl, Yang Shiner, was played by me for over a year, but she still wanted to assassinate me like an ant trying to shake a tree, and was directly crushed to death by me. Also, 70 years ago, the old and weak Niu family actually guarded their treasure and refused to hand it over. They were all killed by me as well. We are the leaders, the backbone of the human race. If the human race has any good things, we should naturally be the first to enjoy them. If there are any treasures, we should immediately offer them up. This is the reward that our generation has put in for so many years. Only when we live comfortably can we better serve the human race. They relied on the fact that they are the families of heroes, and a dead person's name, yet they refused to hand it over. Furthermore, they even dared to say that they deserved to die. The descendants of heroes enjoyed too much of the legacy of heroes, and did not know when to advance or retreat. Weren't they courting death? I allowed them to go to the netherworld and become the families of heroes. After all, their families had all gone down in one piece. Also, 200 years ago, 300 years ago, Dongfang Xingchen's mouth flowed like a torrential river. Incident after incident. Even after an hour, Dongfang Xingchen had only traced back to a few hundred years ago. Dongfang Haoren's face was ashen, and his entire body was trembling. After a long while, when Dongfang Xingchen finally finished speaking, Dongfang Haoren was already on the verge of collapse. He was gasping for breath in large mouthfuls, but his eyes seemed to have popped out of their sockets uncontrollably. He. Dongfang Haoren let out a meaningless sound. He felt as if his heart had stopped beating at this moment, and it was beating so violently that it felt like it was going to jump out of his throat at any moment. The entire galaxy in the universe seemed to explode and shatter in his mind in a myriad of colors. Shimen Fanfu suddenly felt some heartache for this brother of his who had been friends with him for tens of thousands of years. Many of these things had caused even him to feel his blood run cold, and he was so angry that his guts were about to explode. As for Dongfang Haoren, all of these things were actually done by his own son. This caused Dongfang Xingchen, who had given his life for the sake of humanity and was the most proud of himself, to be able to live his life in such a manner? After Dongfang Xingchen finished speaking, his mind was still muddled. Dongfang Haoren's face contorted for a long time, and suddenly, tears flowed down like a spring, flowing down his face as he choked with sobs. So it was like this is the truth. I have let down all of my fallen brothers. Dongfang Haoren choked with sobs, his face filled with sorrow. My fallen brothers. For the sake of humanity, you sacrificed your freedom, sacrificed your life, sacrificed your everything. But your children's bloodline was trampled on by my son. I have let down all of you. I have let down all of you. Dongfang Haoren was in extreme pain, and he felt so guilty that his internal organs were about to shatter. This was something that he had never imagined. He could have stopped asking after asking about this matter, but Dongfang Haoren had to ask. He wanted to find an excuse for his son. He had never done anything bad before, but this time, he had been blinded by greed and his mind had been clouded by a moment of confusion. Even the sentence that he had said was to help Dongfang Haoren's thoughts. Who would have thought that the moment he asked this question, it would be a heart-wrenching pain that made him wish he was dead? Dongfang Haoren felt as if his internal organs were on fire. It was not that his internal injuries were deep, but rather that his mental state was becoming more and more unstable. Thinking back to the past, it was not like he had not heard of the families of his old brothers disappearing, no longer in their homeland. He had even received a letter from his son saying that they had all returned to their homeland, no longer caring about worldly affairs. So many times, he had always sighed. He could not understand why the families of his brothers would move away every once in a while. They were clearly staying close to him, whether it was resources, or if it was convenient for him to take care of them. It was extremely beneficial to the growth of his descendants, so why did they have to move away? He did not understand. Only now did he understand that it was not that they wanted to move away, it was that his son had taken care of them in his place, taking care of their entire family to the point of death. If they really moved away, then that would be the true fortune. At least they would not have to die, and their entire family would be wiped out. That is the bloodline of heroes, the families of my brothers. Dongfang Haoren howled miserably. I am the one who deserves to die. I deserve to die. I deserve to die. I deserve to die. His cries of I deserve to die resounded throughout the world. In his voice, there was a heart-wrenching pain, as well as a lingering sense of despair and guilt. It was indescribable. It was indescribable. There were many things, no, it should be the vast majority of things if he paid a little attention. He would be able to discover the truth, but he did not know anything. Just when did he start to trust his own son so much? It is the fault of the father who did not teach him well, and I, Dongfang Xingchen, have committed an unforgivable crime. He howled in rage and lowered his head, looking at his son with an ashen gaze. There are so many blood debts, and with only your life, how can it be made up for? Dongfang Haoren looked at his son sorrowfully, his eyes filled with blood. His entire body was trembling. At this time, Dongfang Xingchen finally came to his senses, completely awake. He used his eyes that had regained clarity to look at his father's extremely unsightly expression. He actually pretended to be calm and said, "Father, what has happened to make father so worried? Father, please tell me so that I can share your worries." Yes, this was the tone, making him believe that his son would not disappoint him, that this father was a hero and his son was a good man, but the reality was, this father was a stupid bear and his son was a bastard. Dongfang Haoren sucked in a deep breath and closed his eyes. Not only was his body trembling, even his fists were trembling. He spoke in a hoarse voice, "Yun Yang, are you going to do it, or should I?" Chapter 1386. Once Dongfang Xingchen heard Yun Yang's name, he was stunned. Yun Yang. Turning his head, Yun Yang's masked silhouette came into view, standing not far away from him. The pair of eyes behind the mask was glinting with a cold, murderous intent as they locked onto him. Yun Yang's heart was stronger than steel, but he could not help but sigh at this moment. Dongfeng Haoren's words were clear. Who would do it? No matter who did it, Dongfeng Xingchen had to die. He was doomed. In spite of this, Yun Yang was uncharacteristically hesitant, so he said, I've never thought of asking you to do it. After all, even a vicious tiger wouldn't eat its own cubs. Killing your own son is not only a form of heartache to you, it's also an internal demon. Therefore, I've planned to be the one to deal the killing blow from the start. However, things are different now. You've asked so many questions. So many descendants of heroes have died unjustly. If you don't end this yourself, not only will the guilt in your heart be difficult to vent, it will become an internal demon and it will be difficult to give an explanation to the countless wronged souls. Yun Yang paused for a moment before speaking again. It's a dilemma. I wonder if Palace Lord Shimin has any suggestions on how to deal with this? Shimin Fafu's eyes were filled with admiration. Although his son had died a step earlier in Yun Yang's hands, he was still impressed by Yun Yang's ingenuity at the moment. The 2 points that Yun Yang had mentioned were both important points. Whether he let Dongfeng Haoren do it or not, it was a huge problem. As for this suggestion, it was best for him, the indirect party involved, to resolve the issue. Just as he was about to speak, he broke out in a cold sweat. Shimin Fafu suddenly had a thought. Dongfeng Xingchen's actions were insane, heinous, and deserved to die. It was obvious that Dongfeng Haoren did not know about the shady business he had done. Otherwise, the situation would not have spiraled out of control. Then what about himself? What about his own son, Shimin Fafu? Dongfeng Xingchen did not die, and Dongfeng Haoren had asked about these things. This had led to the boundless guilt in his heart. He was in a dilemma, with no way out. What if Shimin Fafu did not die? Should he ask? He might have to ask as well. Would the answer be optimistic? Shimin Fafu didn't have any illusions at all, because he had already remembered that in his own Western Heaven Divine Palace, there seemed to be some descendants of heroes who chose to move their entire family away, fleeing far away. From then on, there was no news of them, as if they had vanished into thin air. Just a moment ago, Dongfeng Xingchen had even said that Shimen Huanyu shared the same opinion as me. Doesn't that mean? Shimen Fengfu broke out in a cold sweat, drenching his robe, but he spoke resolutely. Yun Yang, it's better for you to do it. Dongfeng Haoren could make up for the guilt in his heart by killing enemies in the future, but if he really did something like personally killing his own son, the damage to his heart would be something that he would never be able to make up for in his entire life. Dongfeng Xingchen's eyes widened as he looked from one to another, before looking back at his father. His mind was once again in a state of chaos. What's going on? Are they discussing who's going to kill me? Why? Suddenly, a huge sense of absurdity surged in his heart. Who am I? Where am I? What am I doing? How could this happen? My own father is discussing who's going to kill me with someone else? Father. Dongfeng Xingchen looked at his father pleadingly, his eyes filled with hope. Dongfeng Haoren gritted his teeth and glared at him. Shut up. I, Dongfeng Haoren, do not have a bastard son like you. Clang. Yun Yang pulled out his saber from its scabbard, his murderous intent rising to the next level. Father, save me. Dongfeng Xingchen had already realized something and was unwilling to die, so he screamed at the top of his lungs. However, his last cry for help was only halfway through when Yun Yang's saber light slashed down like a waterfall. He could not wait to see this shameless face ever again. The saber light fell. Blood splattered. Green light rose. His soul was obliterated. Dongfeng Xingchen's body was split into two, falling to the ground with a thud. His head fell to the ground with a thud, rolling a few times before he faced the sky. His eyes still filled with confusion. Why? Dongfeng Haoren faced the sky, his body trembling even more violently. His lips and eyes were tightly shut. He still did not want to see his son's final death. But in the end, he still turned his head and took a look. That tall figure did not change at all, but the feeling it gave was as if he had aged several decades in that instant. It was over. From a small meatball that he had hugged and teased in his arms, to growing up bit by bit, to being taught bit by bit, to experiencing so many years. To this day, at this moment, it had all turned into nothingness. He had died, but the heinous sins he had committed, how could he redeem them? He closed his eyes and could vaguely see countless figures appearing in front of him. They were his brothers, and all of them were angrily questioning him. Dongfeng Haoren, I have fought for humanity my entire life and died. You promised to take care of my descendants. Is this how you take care of them? Dongfeng, where is your promise? Dongfeng, how is my family? Dongfeng, you've taken care of them too well. Should I thank you? Dongfeng, is this how you treat your dead brother's family? Dongfeng Haoran closed his eyes and suddenly roared. No! Brothers, The figure in front of him suddenly disappeared. Shimin Fanfu watched from the side and sighed softly. Dongfeng! Ha! Dongfeng Haoran was confused. Let's go back. Go back. Back to the palace. Call the northern palace. Back to the palace. The matter in this room has already been settled. Back to the palace. Ah. Dongfeng Haoran's voice was distant. After a long time he said as if he was sleep-talking, That's right, we have to go back and clean up the mess. To give an explanation to the brothers who sacrificed themselves back then. I want to go to their graves. To kowtow and ask for forgiveness. My son is unfilial, it's all his old man's fault. Even though this apology is meaningless. Yunyang was silent on the side. At this moment, no matter how intelligent he was, he didn't know what he should say to deal with this situation. It was as if anything he said was meaningless. He firmly believed that he had not done anything wrong, that his killing was justified and gratifying. However, in the face of these two fathers who had just lost their own sons, he could not be completely confident. After all, their sons were killed by him. Kinship was once Yunyang's biggest regret and desire. Even now, with a goal in mind, Yunyang still cherished every bit of kinship. He dared not even imagine what his choice would be if this happened to him. The two palace lords staggered as they turned to leave, their silhouettes extremely bleak. Palace Lord Dongfeng. Yunyang called out after a moment of hesitation. Dongfeng Haoran stopped but did not turn back. What is it? Aren't you going to take your son's body? Yunyang asked. Once Dongfeng Xingchen's soul was destroyed, there would be no trace of him remaining. However, his corpse would still exist, and if he were to bury him, even though it would be akin to burying his head, it would still be a form of consolation to a father. Dongfeng Haoran trembled and froze on the spot. After a long time he gritted his teeth and said hoarsely, Then, feed him to the dogs. Suddenly, with a long howl, he soared into the sky and turned into a ray of light, vanishing in a flash. Shimin Fafu sighed and rolled up his sleeves, wrapping up the two halves of Dongfeng Xingchen's corpse and keeping them into his spatial ring. His voice was hollow as he said, This reputed one wants to go back as well. Go back and investigate whether these people have committed the same sin all these years. His voice was trembling, obviously not the least bit confident in the results of his investigation. In fact, Shimin Fafu knew it very well, like a mirror. His son and Dongfeng Xingchen had similar statuses. Whether it was their foresight, experience or knowledge, they were on par with each other. Even their strategy towards Yunyang, the hero of the Bound of Universe, was the same. With such similar temperaments and almost the same obsession for power, how could they be different when it came to treating heroes differently? He believed that Shimin Huanyu had probably done most of what Dongfeng Xingchen had done, even if he did not do all of them. Shimin Fafu knew his son very well, especially when he had heard Dongfeng Xingchen's confession from a close distance. It would be better if he did not investigate this as he could still be muddle-headed. However, he could not be muddle-headed like this. It was rare for him to be muddle-headed. What about the heroic souls who had died in battle? What about the wronged souls who had died unjustly? He had to investigate this matter. Palace Lord Shimin. Yunyang said solemnly, The dead have passed, please restrain your grief. However, I still have something to say. Having gotten rid of so many people today, for the future development of the three heavenly palaces, it may be a temporary loss of vitality and a sharp decline in combat power, but there will be many benefits in the future. The benefits will ultimately outweigh the disadvantages. The advantages outweigh the disadvantages? With Shimin Fafu's experience, he would not have missed this point and agreed with it. However, what you're talking about is the future after all. The reality now is, my son is dead, I'm sad. My subordinates are dead, I'm sad too. My situation is even worse than that old man Dongfeng Haoran's. I'm now in a dilemma of life and death. How can I face my wife when I return? My son has been killed right in front of me? I know who the murderer is, but I can't avenge him? My wife is furious and wants to seek revenge, but I can't let her come? To a man who has the final say in his own family, this may not be a big deal, but to me, it's like the sky has fallen. Sigh. Shaking his head sadly, Shiman Fafu sighed softly, "Gone, gone." With a swoosh, he turned into a rainbow and left. The three palace lords did not even go to the battlefield where the Saint Lords had fallen to take a look, leaving just like that. Yun Yang stood where he was for a long time. After half a day, he returned and picked up the scattered spatial equipment along the way. At this moment, the huge Tonight City was similar to a dead city. There was not the slightest bit of movement in any direction. From the place where Dongfang Xingchen had fallen to the main battlefield, the personal belongings of the Saint Lords and Sons of Saints were scattered everywhere. Even though they were broken pieces of weapons, they shone brilliantly. Not a single one of them was ordinary. However, no one dared to pick them up. Yun Yang tidied up along the way back, not leaving a single thing unattended. He did not live up to his reputation of plucking feathers as he passed. After collecting all the spatial equipment and broken pieces of weapons, Yun Yang waved his hand and gathered all the remains of the dead experts together. With a punch, he punched a hole in the ground and threw all the broken pieces of flesh and blood into it. Then, with a sweep of his hands, the ground was leveled once again. However, there was not even a tombstone marking the place where the Saint Lords had died. They were destined to vanish from this world, never to be heard of again. After today, perhaps Tonight City will become the new cultivation sanctuary of the Bound of Universe. Even if the ordinary people who live here don't embark on the path of cultivation, just a little nourishment from the spiritual energy of heaven and earth will improve their physique, reducing the possibility of injuries and illnesses. Yun Yang mumbled to himself. Among the cultivators who had fallen in this battle, the lowest cultivation base was at the pinnacle of the 4th level of Saint Venerable, while most of them had the cultivation base of Saint Lords. Their flesh, blood, and bones were filled with the spiritual chi of heaven and earth. Buried underground, they would slowly evaporate and produce a large amount of spiritual energy to nourish heaven and earth. This process could go on for hundreds or even thousands of years. That was why Yun Yang had such a thought. After you die, make a little contribution to the ordinary people of Tonight City, and you can slightly redeem some of your sins. He turned around and looked in another direction. Then, he began to walk over. The other end of that direction was where the people of the Sacred Heart Palace lived. Let's hope they haven't escaped yet. Yun Yang walked over step by step. What he had said to Dongfang Haoren earlier was from the bottom of his heart. Of course, he had to say what he had said. There's no need to go over. A clear voice rang out. The people of the Sacred Heart Palace have all left. Yun Yang turned to look at the source of the voice. White clothes fluttered in the wind and a white veil covered her face. She was slim and graceful like a fairy. It was Shangguan Lingxiu. Why haven't you left? Humph. Shangguan Lingxiu said. If I had left, how could I have seen Lord Supreme Cloud's amazing prowess? Yun Yang felt the murderous aura around him recede like the tide, replaced by serenity and warmth. He smiled and said, I knew there must be something fishy about the two of you agreeing so readily. There was a smile in Shangguan Lingxiu's eyes that was as gentle as spring water. She said, I heard that it's quite a distance from here to the residence of 9 Supremes? Yun Yang understood instantly. He bowed politely in a noble's manner and said, I wonder if this young one has the honor of inviting Lady Shangguan to walk side by side on the journey home? Shangguan Lingxiu thought about it and said reservedly, Since you're quite polite, I shall grant you this opportunity. Chapter 1387. They looked at each other and smiled, instantly knowing each other. What do you plan to do about the Sacred Heart Palace? They've escaped this calamity. We'll take it one step at a time. Well. Their voices grew softer and softer as they went further and further away. They gradually passed through the city and disappeared into the yellow sand path far away. From this day onwards, a new name had been added to Tonight City. The Land of Saint Massacre. In less than half a month's time, there were actually over 100 Saint Monarchs who were currently at the pinnacle of combat strength that had perished here. What was even more terrifying was that these 100 Saint Lords had all been killed by one person. Naturally, a new legend was born. Supreme Cloud had returned from his battle against the demons and executed the human rebels here. He had killed hundreds of Saint Lords in one battle and shocked the world. It was not until 3 days after Yun Yang left that people finally dared to move on the streets of Tonight City. However, this was a story for another time. After the 3 palace masters of the 3 great sky palaces returned, they did not say a word and immediately launched a massive purge. Countless people were purged. At the same time, the entire palace was mobilized to investigate the descendants and families of the heroes who had sacrificed themselves. Those who had disappeared for no reason were searched for the bloodline of the heroes. In front of the Temple of Brave Souls, the 3 palace lords knelt down. After the 3 palace lords dealt with some matters, Dongfeng Haoran and Beigong Liuli announced their closed-door cultivation at the same time. They recalled the sons of saints and temporarily took charge of the situation. The people of the heavenly palaces were not allowed to go out, except those who were stationed at Blood Soul Mountain and those who had returned from there. An unusual battle broke out in West Heaven Saint Palace. It was said that the Lord of West Heaven Saint Palace and his wife fought, and only half of the palace was destroyed. His wife wanted to avenge her son, but the palace lord stopped her no matter what. In the end, the Lord of West Heaven Saint Palace, Shiman Fafu, was indeed a pinnacle saint, the strongest person in the world. He suppressed his wife and even strengthened her husband's authority. However, there were also rumors that his wife cried out in grief after the battle and announced that she would not fall out with Shiman Fafu anymore and that she would divorce her husband. Shiman Fafu collected his son's crimes and threw them in front of his wife. He scolded her until the world turned upside down and the sun and moon dimmed. It was a rare moment of heroism. His wife did not seem to make a fuss anymore. Of course, very few people mentioned the final outcome of this matter. Most likely, no one knew the more detailed details. Yunyang and Shangguan Lingxiu returned in the direction of the residence of 9 Supremes. On this day, as they passed through Lianyun Mountains, they passed a valley and Yunyang suddenly frowned. What a thick smell of blood. Yunyang and Luo Binghe were surprised to notice something amiss. Following the scent of blood, they arrived at a secluded valley in a moment. As far as the eye could see, the surroundings of the valley were covered in pure white snow, and only the center of the valley that was around a few kilometers in circumference was a complete mess. Yunyang Yun God, and Yun 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 1. Yunyang and Shangguan Lingxiu observed carefully and realized that the valley was littered with traces of blood, broken weapons, and dismembered corpses. It was a testament to the devastation of the battle. The two of them were surprised and paid more attention to the battle in the valley. Shangguan Lingxiu looked puzzled. It's obvious that a great battle had taken place here not too long ago, and both parties involved were quite capable. There were at least cultivators above the level of Supreme Saint. Otherwise, the battle wouldn't have ended up like this. Feeling the deathly stillness in the valley, Yunyang could not help closing his eyes to discern it carefully. The murderer has been gone for at least 6 hours. If my guess is correct, the person who was attacked here should be someone from the Sacred Heart Palace. Yunyang's face was filled with indescribable discomfort. Previously, his main target was the 3 holy sons of the heavenly palaces. Although he had also pressured the Sacred Heart Palace, it was not too much. After all, there were not many people in the Sacred Heart Palace, and Lei Qianli was the only clown. Yunyang even saw the Sacred Heart Palace as an ally. After all, the Sacred Heart Palace did not have a direct conflict with him like the sons of 3 heavenly palaces. He believed that most of the people who followed Lei Qianli here this time were hot-blooded warriors of the human race. That day at the Golden Knight Tower, those people's dissatisfaction towards Great Elder Lei Qianli had all entered Yunyang's eyes. It was because of this that Yunyang did not openly offend Lei Qianli on the spot. He did not want to put others in a difficult position. Lei Qianli, who had long been targeted by Yunyang as a traitor, must have someone else behind his back. His threat might even be higher than the group of holy sons. Acting recklessly would only cause unnecessary conflict. After all, these people were still Lei Qianli's subordinates in name. There would be a chance to settle the score with Lei Qianli, the clown, in the future. However, he did not expect this tragedy to happen in the end. He had actually underestimated Lei Qianli by labeling him as a clown. Yunyang glided forward and looked around at the corpses that were strewn all over the ground to see if there were any survivors. He saw that the bodies of each of the deceased were dried up as if their flesh and blood had been sucked away by something. There was no chance of survival at all, however. The faces of each of the dried corpses were filled with anger and grief. It was as if they were still questioning and roaring before they died. Yunyang could only feel waves of heartache. It was not about the level of their abilities. These people might not be able to reach the level of the saints who had made things difficult for him in the Golden Knight Tower in their entire lives. But each of these people was a man of indomitable spirit. At the very least, they would not harm a hero. I'm sorry I'm late. Yunyang let out a long sigh and stood up. Let these brothers rest in peace. He carefully tidied up the remains of each person and packed up their belongings. He was prepared to hand them over to their families when he returned to the Sacred Heart Palace. When he reached the corpse in the middle, Yunyang unexpectedly found a line of scribbled words that were almost illegible. Lei Qianli is a demon race spy. Yunyang let out a long sigh again, deeply regretting his late arrival. Why had he not come earlier? What he didn't know was that this incident had nothing to do with him. Whether Yunyang came late or early, it would not affect this matter at all. In fact, on the night of the banquet, when Lei Qianli had returned, the people of the Sacred Heart Palace had almost started fighting amongst themselves. More than 50 people had asked Lei Qianli directly, "What do you mean?" Lei Qianli had used many flowery words to defend himself. In the end, he had used the excuse that he was worried that they would really welcome a fake Supreme Cloud and become the laughingstock of the Sacred Heart Palace. However, in the next few days, the people of the Sacred Heart Palace had become more and more displeased with Lei Qianli. This strong dissatisfaction had completely erupted when Yunyang was fighting the 8 saints, but Lei Qianli still continued to argue and refused to admit that Yunyang was Supreme Cloud. Are all of you blind? So many saints are fighting that masked man to their death. Doesn't that mean that the masked man is not a good person? Are all the saints stupid to gang up on the hero of the bound of universe? The only explanation is that the masked man is not a good person. At least, he can't be Lord Supreme Cloud. It had to be said that Lei Qianli's words made sense. At least a small group of people had been bewitched by his words, causing the people of the Sacred Heart Palace to be divided into 2 groups. Later, under Lei Qianli's incitement, they finally came to a decision. They would not help either side and leave immediately. They would go back and not get involved in this mess. Therefore, the people from the Sacred Heart Palace had actually withdrawn when Yunyang was fighting with the Son of God. Along the way, however, there was still a stormy quarrel. Lei Qianli repeatedly slandered the masked man and refused to admit that the man was Yunyang. He even used his own identity to make a fuss, using the tiger skin as a banner, which made everyone more and more unconvinced. Finally, when the soul demon returned, the conflict broke out completely. Han Yao suffered a strong shock. After returning, he was silent for a day, still in a state of shock. Then, he could not bear it anymore and killed a saint emperor in the middle of the night, absorbing the soul to calm himself down. And this incident became the breaking point of the bloody case. There is a traitor among us, a traitor with ulterior motives. With this sentence as the beginning, it completely ignited an unprecedented conflict. On the spot, someone threatened, "When we go back, we must report to the Temple Lord to take down Lei Qianli and investigate." Then the crowd was simply divided into 2 groups. Most of them chose the other way back and no longer traveled with Lei Qianli. It was also that night that Lei Qianli and the others came. A tragedy was brewing. I have probably guessed the whole story of your murder case and know what you want to do. Don't worry, I will help you do it. Yunyang said quietly in front of the newly erected grave. Lei Qianli, Han Yao. Yunyang had doubts about Lei Qianli since a long time ago. Back when he was at the Lei family, he had met the demon soul, a demon of calamity that only existed in legends, by chance. He had also learned some old stories from Dong Qitian, so he had long locked onto Lei Qianli as a target. In the battle a few days ago, Han Yao hid in the dark, waiting for the opportunity to launch a sneak attack. Although Emmy's momentary mistake caused the layout to be flawed, it still made Yunyang further confirm that there was something wrong with Lei Qianli. After today's incident, Lei Qianli was no longer a suspect, but a confirmed crime. His crime was unforgivable. Lei Qianli must be killed. Yunyang said fiercely. Shangguan Lingxiu frowned as she listened to Yunyang's brief account of the incident. I'm afraid we can't act rashly. I think that killing Lei Qianli in a hurry will alert the enemy instead. Now it proves that there must be a demon expert hiding behind Lei Qianli. Yunyang agreed with Shangguan Lingxiu's point of view as well. If we can't uncover the person hiding behind this, I'm afraid that eliminating Lei Qianli alone won't affect the grand scheme of things. The Sacred Heart Palace will still be faced with many dangers. It's not impossible for it to disintegrate and disappear overnight. Shangguan Lingxiu pondered and said, Then what do you plan to do next? We can't delay the Sacred Heart Palace. Let's not go back to the residence of 9 Supremes. Let's go directly to the Sacred Heart Palace. Yunyang said seriously, Even if Zhang Wufei is prepared and even knows that there is a spy in the Sacred Heart Palace, he may not be able to lock the target on Lei Qianli. If Lei Qianli is desperate, Zhang Wufei will be in danger. Even if we kill Lei Qianli afterward, it will still be useless. Shangguan Lingxiu nodded. That's right. Let's go then. Yun Yang did not waste any time. He identified the direction and activated his mystical skill, tearing the space apart and leaving with Shangguan Lingxiu and Shangguan Lingxiu. The Sacred Heart Palace. At the foot of the mountain. Lei Qianli and his less than 20 subordinates finally arrived at the foot of the mountain. Looking at the misty clouds halfway up the mountain, a sense of guilt grew. He had brought 120 men with him to welcome the hero when he left. Now, the hero had not been received and only 20 men had returned. Those who had fallen were all killed by him. Lei Qianli had absolute confidence that Zhang Wufei would not know about this, but it did not mean that he did not feel guilty. It's fine. The man in green beside him said casually. You only need to go in and say what we've discussed. The current situation is that Supreme Cloud's identity is a mystery. Without removing his mask, it's a fact that we can't tell. You don't need to prove your innocence. Just make sure that it's confusing and difficult to come to a conclusion. Lei Qianli gritted his teeth and said, What about the soul demon? It's better to let the soul demon attach to me. If something goes wrong, we'll join forces and kill our way out. Letting the soul demon follow him was obviously a way of retreat he had prepared for himself. Don't you know that it's unrealistic to let the soul demon go up? The man in green said faintly. The aura on the soul demon is too gloomy and gloomy. How can there be no spiritual sense experts in the Sacred Heart Palace? It's inevitable that we'll be discovered. That'll be the real waste of all our previous efforts. Even if there's a chance that Zhang Wufei will turn against us, you just have to rush out immediately and you'll naturally have a way out. Even if you're not Zhang Wufei's opponent, if Zhang Wufei says he wants to kill you, it won't be a short time. As long as you don't fight him head-on and focus on breaking out, you'll still be able to come out even if you're inevitably injured. If Zhang Wufei pursues you here, the Soul Demon and I will not only be your backup but also the trump card to kill Zhang Wufei. Lei Qianli thought for a long time. All right, let's do it. The Sacred Heart Palace. In the main hall, Zhang Wufei's burly body sat on the throne. His eyes were clear as he stared at the sorrowful great elder Lei Qianli. It's hard to say. The purpose of our trip this time is to welcome the return of a hero, but there were too many heroes and supreme clouds in the city tonight. There were many saint lords who covered their faces that day, calling themselves supreme clouds every time they opened their mouths. In the beginning, Holy Sun Dongfang and the others had already received one. Later, everyone present was confused and couldn't figure out which one was the real supreme cloud. Every supreme cloud present had a supporter, but none of them were willing to remove their masks. In the end, a great battle broke out. What a fiery fight! Chapter 1388. The Sacred Heart Palace's stand was to protect Supreme Cloud, even at the cost of our lives. However, all the Supreme Clouds who participated in the battle were high-level Saint Monarchs. There was no room for us to intervene at all, not to mention that we couldn't even determine which one was the real Supreme Cloud. We couldn't even bear the aftermath. Initially, I considered the situation and decided to wait and see. I didn't expect one of the Supreme Clouds to ask for our help and the other Supreme Clouds to do the same, including the residents of 9 Supremes. In the end, we didn't even have a chance to help. Instead, we were targeted by everyone. It was like a disaster had fallen from the sky. 101 brothers all died in the battle in Tonight City. As for us, even after the battle ended, we still couldn't tell which of the survivors was the real Supreme Cloud. Even though we knew that there was only one Supreme Cloud, everyone could be him. After that battle, the situation became even more chaotic. Even many holy sons were dragged into the battle. Seeing that there was nothing we could do, we decided to retreat from Tonight City. It was not because we were negligent in our mission. We had no confidence in dealing with it, and we didn't want to add more casualties. This decision was made by me alone. If the Temple Lord has any punishment, I will bear it. We were truly exhausted. We had the heart to kill the enemy, but we were powerless to do anything. So many brothers were killed right in front of us. We were too weak to take revenge, and we didn't even know who killed them. Lei Qianli's old tears streamed down his face. Temple Lord. It's too tragic. Too tragic. 120 brothers. Only 20 of us returned in the end. I, Lei Qianli, don't have the face to see you again. Lei Qianli's choked voice echoed in the grand hall. I really didn't expect that we would bring such a disaster upon ourselves when we went to welcome our glory. Everyone in the grand hall paled when they heard Lei Qianli's report. None of the people present had expected that such a bizarre change would occur in what was originally a perfectly fine matter. Now that more than 100 of their comrades had died in Night City, who else could they find for revenge? Zhang Wufei sucked in a deep breath and closed his eyes, as if trying to suppress the churning emotions in his heart. After a while he asked, "So, you don't know the final outcome of tonight's battle?" "I don't know. Palace Master, please punish me. You don't even know whether Supreme Cloud will live or die." I don't know. Hall Master, please punish this old man." Lei Qianli raised his head mournfully. "Palace Master Rongbing, the level of the battle in Night City has long surpassed our understanding. There were more than 100 great monarchs competing against each other. The situation was so chaotic that it was indescribable. Our strength was completely unable to interfere. Many of our brothers were simply killed by the aftershocks." Lei Qianli's eloquence was quite impressive. He repeatedly apologized for his mistakes, saying that he was the only one who made the decision. However, the people from the Sacred Heart Palace were not ignorant people. There were more than 100 great lords competing with each other. Even the experts from the Sacred Heart Palace would not be able to withstand the repercussions of the aftermath. Lei Qianli's decision to retreat decisively and preserve his fighting strength was not only not wrong, it was even meritorious. Not fearing death, not hesitating to die, and sacrificing for nothing were two completely different concepts. Zhang Wufei sighed deeply, speechless. After a long while, he murmured, "When will the greed of humans for power and profit end? They know that they are facing a great enemy like the demon race, yet they continue to fight amongst themselves. Even with such a perfect heavenly Tao, it is still unable to stop the treacherous schemes of these lowly people. The blood debt of more than 100 brothers. What should our Sacred Heart Palace do about it? Without a goal, don't tell me. These over 100 brothers have died in vain?" Zhang Wufei's sorrowful voice echoed in the grand hall. Everyone's faces were filled with rage. Lord Supreme Cloud risked his life to enter the depths of the demon race for the sake of what I entrusted to him. He went through countless trials and tribulations before returning, and even made a great contribution. But he is being treated like this by these treacherous lowly people. Where is justice in the hearts of the people? At the banquet, more than a dozen supreme clouds appeared one after another, each of them with the cultivation base of a great lord. How powerful is the mastermind behind them? How many forces and how many people plotted this to lead to such an outcome? But this matter itself is even more chilling, shocking, and infuriating. After this incident, who wouldn't be chilled? Who would still be willing to work for them? Who would still be willing to sacrifice? If that's the case, why don't we just give this vast territory to the demon race and create a new world? Zhang Wufei said in grief and indignation. At least dying in the hands of the demon race is a heroic sacrifice after fighting back. But dying in the schemes of our own people, what is that? The entire grand hall fell into a pin-drop silence. Only Zhang Wufei's sorrowful and indignant voice echoed for a long time. Lei Qianli hung his head low, but his tensed heart had already relaxed. His strategy of retreating in order to advance had worked. Zhang Wufei would no longer suspect him. This matter had been dealt with for now. More than 100 of our brothers died in battle. List out the names. Zhang Wufei's expression was sorrowful. Compensate the families of those who died in the battle against the demon race, settle them down, and train their descendants. Yes. Lei Qianli, your subordinate is here. This trip of yours. Sigh. Zhang Wufei seemed to want to say a few words of consolation, but the words did not leave his mouth. Bring the remaining brothers. Rest well for 2 days. But don't go into seclusion. There are still many things that require your explanation, as well as the follow-up matters regarding Supreme Cloud that require your assistance. His voice finally trembled slightly. This seat's thoughts are in a mess right now. All of you may leave. Zhang Wufei closed his eyes after he finished speaking. An unprecedentedly solemn atmosphere slowly spread throughout the grand hall. Lei Qianli walked out of the grand hall and looked at the remaining 19 men under him. His expression was somber as he said, Everyone has worked hard on this trip. Go back and rest and calm yourselves. This journey has been too tough for our brothers. Yes. The men dispersed and went their separate ways. Lei Qianli also walked with heavy steps towards his own residence. His expression was sorrowful and solemn, sighing deeply from time to time. However, a jade pendant had already been silently crushed in his wide sleeve. At the foot of the mountain, in a secluded valley, the green-clothed man smiled faintly and muttered, "This Lei Qianli is indeed a wily old fox, and his tongue is even sharper." Even after such a huge incident, Zhan Wufei still did not suspect him and allowed him to slip through. Even I have to give him the word respect. So the current leader of the Sacred Heart Palace is actually this muddle-headed. What's there to be afraid of? He floated out and drifted slowly towards a direction on the smooth snow-covered ground. He said faintly, "Soul, follow me. This matter is temporarily settled, we should hide. The next time we appear, it'll be the time when the world changes." A cloud of smoke silently rose up and followed behind him, heading in the same direction. Dozens of miles away. Yun Yang's deific consciousness, which had already reached the level of a half-saint, was fully unleashed. Soundlessly, he had monitored thousands of miles of space around him. Suddenly, his eyes flashed as he stared towards the east. There was a sinister fluctuation of the power of the soul in that direction. The target was there? He landed abruptly and dived into the dense forest below with Shangguan Lingxiu. Using the countless trees to conceal themselves, he stuck close to the ground and followed in that direction. His speed was extremely fast, but he was also extremely cautious. Just as Yun Yang was about to move, there was a soft gust of wind behind him. A figure suddenly appeared behind him with a whoosh. It was the leader of the Sacred Heart Palace, Zhan Wufei. "Have you found him?" "Yes. He's in that direction." Both of them communicated telepathically. "Where's Lei Qianli?" Yun Yang asked. "I've pacified that old man." Zhan Wufei's eyes were filled with extreme hatred. "If it weren't for the person behind him, I would have eaten him alive." "It's all right. Lei Qianli is in the Sacred Heart Palace now. As long as he doesn't suspect anything, he won't expose himself and escape. Even if he escapes, it's just a small matter. As for this side, it's the true enemy that must be eliminated." Yun Yang said, "Things have their priorities, there's a choice." "That's right." Zhan Wufei said in a low voice, "My emotions are unstable now. It's easy to be noticed. You're in front, I'll be 50 miles behind you, waiting for an opportunity. Once the battle starts, I'll follow the movement you've made and rush over immediately." "All right." The man in green took the soul demon and crossed 3 mountains in a row. During this period, he deliberately changed his position 7 or 8 times. Only then did he laugh self-deprecatingly. "There's really no accident, but it's never a big mistake to be cautious." His slender body suddenly merged with the soul demon, and his speed rose again as he shot in another direction like a bolt of lightning. The other side of that direction was a bottomless abyss. The man in green's body came to the edge of the abyss quickly and jumped down without hesitation. As the clouds and mist rippled slightly, his body was already hidden under the bottomless abyss. How could such a hiding place be discovered if one did not see it with one's own eyes? After a breath, Yun Yang's body landed on the cliff as light as a feather. With just a glance, his body swayed and he went to the rock where the man in green had jumped down. After a moment of hesitation, he also stood on the rock. Without the slightest hesitation, he leaped up. The place where he landed was exactly the same as where the man in green had jumped down. The distance was exactly the same, not the slightest bit different. In the thick clouds and mist, Yun Yang's figure was like a floating feather, falling slowly and silently. Yun Yang, who had long been used to the company of clouds and mist, was far more familiar with its properties than others. Even if the heaven-sealing seal was still there and it was difficult to use his manifestation powers, he was still like a fish in water in the clouds and mist. He had changed into plain white clothes earlier, and in the hazy clouds and mist, he was even more inconspicuous. Wherever he passed, there was even no unusual fluctuation in the clouds and mist. The reason why Yun Yang was so careful was that he did not know who he was following. The only thing he knew now was that this person was very important. This person, as well as Lei Qianli, should be the demon race's spies lurking in the human race. They had been buried in the bound of universe for thousands of years, or even longer. Lei Qianli had been the great elder of the Sacred Heart Palace for a long time. This was already a very high status in the human race. However, compared to that person, he probably paled in comparison. It was expected that the person's management in the human race was more effective. After so many years of painstaking management, there must be a plan. If it were not for the fact that Yun Yang had a special feeling for the soul demon, he would not have been able to find this person at all this time. The bottomless abyss in front of him, such an unexpected hiding place, could already be seen. However, now that he had found him, he could not let him escape this time no matter what. They had already drifted down to a depth of about 40 to 50,000 feet, but they still had not reached the bottom. It was often said that the bottomless abyss was a bottomless abyss, but it was really rare in the world. An abyss of 30 to 5,000 feet was already a rare big abyss. Now that they had fallen 40 to 50,000 feet, they still had not reached the bottom. It was really amazing and amazing. In the monitoring of Yun Yang's divine sense, the soul demon was still moving below, continuing to go down. This proved that there was more here. Could it be a veritable bottomless abyss? Above, Zhan Wufei leaped down. It was not until about 13,000 feet that Yun Yang felt the ground again. When he looked again, even someone as daring as Yun Yang could not help but feel a chill run down his spine. The bottom of this bottomless abyss was a land of death. A veritable land of death. Countless bones covered a thick layer. All the ground under the cliff was covered with white bones. It was unknown how many bones there were and how many years they had been piled up. Other than that, there was nothing else. There was no other color at all, not even a blade of grass. There was only the white bones all the way to the distance. T. How many people have died here? Yun Yang, who considered himself to be ruthless and had been stained with blood, could not help but be speechless at the sight. Yun Yang did not stand on the white bones. Instead, he hovered in the air, hovering a few inches above the bones, and sped towards the direction he could vaguely sense. There were countless bones here. Who knew when the bones under his feet belonged to and who they belonged to? With Yun Yang's current cultivation base, even if he restrained his energy to the greatest extent, it was inevitable that some bones would be damaged by inadvertent contact, and the damage was bound to make a noise. In such a quiet place, the slightest unexpected noise could alert the enemy, turning the situation of the enemy in the dark and him in the light. In short, there was no harm in being careful. Dozens of miles behind him, Zhan Wufei had also landed quietly. His movements were as silent as Yun Yang's, extremely cautious. Chapter 1389. All the way out for hundreds of miles, the whole way was shrouded in thick fog, and there was no road at the other end of the road. There was only a mountain wall. Yun Yang confirmed that the aura of the soul demon had disappeared here. In other directions, there was no aura of the soul demon. Only in the mountain wall, there was a vague feeling. In other words, the soul demon had sneaked into the mountain wall in front of him. Yun Yang did not act rashly because he could still feel that there was an extremely sinister force hidden behind the cliff. Although it was concealed, it was real and there was not the slightest hint of it. Yun Yang looked closely and found that there was no gap in the mountain wall in front of him. However, Yun Yang was sure that there must be another world inside. Therefore, Yun Yang tried to penetrate it with his divine sense in the way of flowing mercury. The solid wall, which seemed to be flawless to the naked eye, was penetrated bit by his divine sense. However, the moment Yun Yang's divine sense reached the other side of the mountain wall, he felt a majestic and endless demonic power coming head-on. Yun Yang was almost scared to death. Because it was the demonic power of the Phoenix Emperor. But how could there be the demonic power of the Phoenix Emperor in the human world? Yun Yang's thoughts turned quickly and he carefully probed again. With the slight contact just now, Yun Yang vaguely sensed that the demonic power did belong to the Phoenix, but the demonic power of the Phoenix Emperor was not very strong. At least, it was much weaker than what Yun Yang had seen that day. Probably only a few tenths of the Phoenix Emperor's power limit. Yun Yang, whose cultivation base had improved greatly, was confident that this power could not cause much threat to himself. He could even take the way of wearing it down bit by bit and completely eliminate it. Do what you want to do and eliminate danger before it happens. For Yun Yang, the Phoenix Emperor was an invincible enemy. It was extremely rare to have an opportunity to kill its power, and it would not come again if he missed it. Yun Yang made a prompt decision and immediately activated the endless divine art to confront the power of the Phoenix Emperor. Yun Yang activated the power of the endless divine art and entangled the power of the Phoenix Emperor with a lingering momentum. Although the Phoenix Emperor itself was strong, it was only a few tenths of its power. It was no longer a threat to Yun Yang, whose cultivation base had increased greatly. He was confident that he could annihilate it in a very short time. But, with a soft boom, the demonic power of the Phoenix Emperor broke through the stone wall and gushed out in a frenzy. The lingering power that Yun Yang had constructed with the endless divine art had been broken through. His strategy had failed. At the same time, the expression of the man in green changed. Oh no! Even though the situation had changed and both sides had switched sides, Yun Yang was still fearless. The previous battle with the Saint Monarch had further allowed Yun Yang to experience the absolute power that was sufficient to lock onto the truth of all schemes. Now that he had found the place, even if there were some changes, it would not affect the grand scheme. As Yun Yang informed Zhang Wufei with a long howl, he unleashed his full strength and struck with his saber. The divine edge of the blade of heavens will shook the world. With a loud boom, the flawless stone wall was completely shattered. The saber light was still not over, and it slashed into the belly of the mountain, continuing for thousands of feet. At the same time, the abundant demonic power that originally belonged to the Phoenix Emperor met Yun Yang head-on for the second time. Yun Yang, who took the hit head-on, grunted. Although he had already struck with all his might, he was still sent flying thousands of feet away from the ground like a kite with a broken string, crashing into the stone wall on the other side. The shockwave caused the entire mountain to tremble. Countless rocks tumbled down from the sky. The power of the Phoenix Emperor's portion of demonic power had far exceeded Yun Yang's estimation. Yun Yang felt dizzy, his body almost going limp. He took a deep breath and his energy was greatly replenished. He straightened his back and stood up. He did not seem to have suffered much damage. The Phoenix Emperor's demonic power, however, seemed to only have the power for this one strike. After that one strike, it disappeared immediately. Yun Yang dashed into the hole that had appeared after the stone wall had shattered like a bolt of lightning. At this moment, he understood many things at once. This place must have been set up by the Phoenix Emperor a long time ago, and the power that originally belonged to the Phoenix Emperor was also set up as a precaution. This was the territory of the Sacred Heart Palace. Although the Sacred Heart Palace was a high-level force of the human race in the bounded universe, their top combat power was few and far between. Yun Yang might have escaped unscathed after that strike, but if it were an expert from the Sacred Heart Palace, even if it were the palace master of the Sacred Heart Palace, Zhang Wufei, the sudden eruption of this power would be enough to annihilate Zhang Wufei and even his subordinates. At the very least, it would be able to destroy most of the enemy's combat power, greatly increasing the chances of the lurker escaping. However, the current situation was that Yun Yang, a newly ascended 4th grade Saint Monarch, had come looking for him. Based on Yun Yang's current combat power, he was still not strong enough to fight against the real body of the Phoenix Emperor. However, just the power of one strike was not enough to kill him. This was probably the saying, even a wise man would make a mistake. While Yun Yang rejoiced inwardly, a sense of fear crept into his heart. The power that he had faced just now was unstoppable. Even with his current combat power after his cultivation base had improved tremendously, he was still no match for it. It was only a wisp of power that the Phoenix Emperor had left behind many years ago. It had been at least a few thousand years or even tens of thousands of years, but it was still so powerful. How could it not make one's scalp tingle and feel a lingering fear? It was truly too powerful. Just as Yun Yang rushed into the mountain wall, Zhang Wufei entered like a whirlwind. Naturally, he felt the remnant waves of power at the same time and shuddered. Luckily, it was Yun Yang who took the blame. If it were me, both of them had just recovered from the shock. Looking over, they saw a wide tunnel that was about 100 feet wide, getting wider the further in they went. Yun Yang did not slow down, passing through the tunnel in an instant and arriving at the belly of the mountain. However, when he looked over, he was shocked by what he saw. The entire belly of the mountain on the other side was completely hollowed out, creating a piece of flat land that was thousands of feet wide. At the innermost core of the empty space was an altar. There were 8 other directions surrounding this altar, 8 pools of blood. Each pool carried a huge amount of fresh blood that was still tumbling, emitting a thick, pungent stench of blood. In the middle, there was a strange pattern. It seemed to be a leaf? The thick air of blood in the pool of blood was flowing into the pattern in the middle. A faint force was brewing and gradually growing stronger. At this moment, A man dressed in green was standing in front of the altar, tall and straight. Beside him, another ball of gray energy formed a blurry human silhouette. If it was not the demon's soul, it was that again. Yun Yang revealed himself, saber light glinting as it pointed straight at the man in green. The man smiled calmly. Worthy of the bound of universe's supreme cloud indeed. Impressive, to be able to find this place in such a short time. I'm very surprised and impressed. Yun Yang looked over and was shocked again. Was the person in front of him Mr. Nian or the Phoenix Emperor? Yun Yang squinted his eyes. You recognize me? The man in green smiled faintly, looking relaxed. Lord Supreme Cloud is famous in the bound of universe and is renowned throughout the world. How can I not know? Yun Yang's eyes flickered. You guessed it, didn't you? The man in green frowned. Why? Seeing the man in green state, Yun Yang was relieved. The person in front of him was not the Phoenix Emperor. At the very least, it was not the Phoenix Emperor herself. It was not even a clone that was connected to her soul. Otherwise, her reaction would not have been so calm. She should have attacked and killed him directly, or even launched a self-destruct attack without saying a word, putting herself at death's door as much as she could. Who are you? This question was not asked by Yun Yang, but by Zhan Wufei. The man in green sighed deeply when he saw Zhan Wufei and said, Forgive me for not welcoming you earlier, Sacred Heart Palace Lord. Lei Qianli is really a clown. He has long been exposed, but he doesn't know it. He thinks he has muddled his way through and is so smug. Zhan Wufei sneered and said, Lei Qianli? I've been suspicious of him since a few thousand years ago. Ever since the Soul Fiend incident, I've always felt that something was wrong with him. It's just that I didn't do anything to him because I wanted to cast a long line to catch a big fish. If you had acted earlier, he would have been eradicated a long time ago. Don't tell me you really think that your plan is so ingenious? The man in green laughed and said, I didn't expect you, Zhan Wufei, to be so well hidden and scheming. Not bad, not bad. You've really surprised me. Zhan Wufei snorted coldly. It's just that you've misjudged Lei Qianli's usefulness. He has done most of what I needed him to do. Also, I misjudged you because you're not worthy of my attention at all. Just like now, if Supreme Cloud hadn't come with you, you would have died here without knowing why. The man in green heaved a long sigh. Heavens will make fools of us. The unpredictable will of heaven can't be shaken by mere humans. Yun Yang replied faintly, May I ask for your name? You must be plotting something big, considering how long you have been planning this. The man in green's eyes were half-lidded as he said, I have many, many names. You can call me Mr. Nian, or Mr. Feng, or Mr. Yun. It doesn't matter if you call me Mr. Soul. I have hundreds of identities. You can call me whatever you want. Mr. Nian. Mr. Feng. Yun Yang's pupils shrunk instantly. He thought of the Four Seasons Towers Mr. Nian and Feng Xiang'e at once. The hatred in his heart that had died down was ignited once more. You've been in the bound of universe all this while. Have you been plotting something big? Yun Yang asked. Supreme Cloud, your question is rather abrupt. Everything here has yet to be settled. How can we have the time to go somewhere else? Mr. Nian was rather surprised by Yun Yang's question. Judging from Supreme Cloud's attitude, why does it seem like you have a grudge against me? Could it be that he has a grudge against someone who looks exactly like me? Yun Yang took a step forward. How many people have such a face like yours? Also, you've been plotting here for so long. What exactly are you plotting? What is your motive? Are you human or a demon? Or perhaps, another species? Yun Yang had always been wise and observant. He was meticulous and observant. He had only been in contact with the man before him for a short while, but he could vaguely sense that this person and the force behind him were not to be underestimated. The man in green's expression remained indifferent as he said, Supreme Cloud has asked so many questions. Which one do you want me to answer? Why do you think I'll answer? Now that you've found this place, I'm destined to die. Why should someone who's destined to die answer your questions? Supreme Cloud's questions aren't human. Yun Yang chuckled and said, That's not necessarily the case. Once you die, you'll die anyway. What happens after today has nothing to do with you anymore. Why don't you tell me everything I've asked? This is a plot that's been laid out for at least thousands of years, even tens of thousands of years. It'd be a waste to give up even a chance to talk. The man in green chuckled. Supreme Cloud's eloquence may not be inferior to the divine blade in your hand, but Supreme Cloud's questions, I really can't answer much. With a look of reminiscence on his face, he said, for example, the origin of my identity. Even I don't know how I came here. I only know that in the beginning, I was just a ghost, a special existence like the soul demon. It was only a coincidence that I was thrown into the body of a newborn baby, erased the imprint of life and reintegrated. After that, I began to live the life of an ordinary person. I spent a period of peace and tranquility. After that, I stepped onto the path of martial arts. As my cultivation increased step by step, my hidden memories began to awaken bit by bit. Some cultivation methods that were compatible with my cultivation also surfaced. All I needed to do was to continue to cultivate and continue to grow stronger. The man in green looked a little confused and said, even to this day, I still don't know if I'm a human or something. It wasn't until I broke through the saint realm that one day I suddenly knew my mission. It was also at that time that I found the soul demon. Listening to this, Yun Yong vaguely understood the origin and background of the man in green in front of him. At first glance, the origin of the person in front of him sounded like some geniuses in the eyes of the world. Born knowing. Nothing could stump him, his path was smooth, like a born protagonist in a legendary legend. Moreover, he was the kind of protagonist who naturally had the corresponding memory when he reached a certain point, and he had a shadowless, unrivaled soul demon as his companion. It was a standard for a protagonist in life. But it was also because of this that Yun Yang could be sure that although this fellow looked the same as the Four Seasons Tower's Mr. Nian, they were definitely not the same thing. Although the root cause was related to the Phoenix Emperor, the final destination was completely different. Your mission is here? Yun Yang asked. Yes, my mission is here. The face and actions of the man in green were always very indifferent, as if he did not care about anything. Zhan Wufei asked, then what is your relationship with Lei Qianli? The green-clothed man said indifferently, Lei Qianli, according to the story, is my childhood friend. Because he really is the child of my neighbor. Even his name was given by me. In those days, we were also good brothers who treated each other with sincerity. It's just that after I awakened my mission, I took control of his spirit. Then, I made him work for me. Entering the Sacred Heart Palace was naturally my idea. He laughed. My original plan was to let him become the leader of the Sacred Heart Palace. For this, I even threw out the soul demon to let him succeed, but I didn't expect that it would still fall short of success. Zhan Wufei only felt a chill in his heart, and Yun Yang's palms were full of cold sweat. If Lei Qianli became the leader of the Sacred Heart Palace, what would happen? Chapter 1390. At least one thing was certain. If Lei Qianli had really become the leader of the Sacred Heart Palace, the situation would be much, much worse than it was now. Chaos might have already taken shape. What about the altar behind you and these pools? Yun Yang asked. They are the reverse yin and yang pools, the man in green answered without hesitation. What are their specific uses? Lord Supreme Cloud's question has always been my question, but I really don't know what these pools are used for. The man in green smiled bitterly and said, I've always known what I need to do, but it doesn't mean that I'm willing to do these things. To be fair, I've always been unhappy in my heart for so many years, so I've never really smiled. He still looked at Yun Yang with a faint smile on his face and said, I've always maintained this expression. Can you understand what I'm thinking? Yun Yang could not help sighing. I think I get the gist of it. If I'm not wrong, it's because your mission is going against the rise and fall of mankind. You've been in the human realm for so many years and you've already regarded yourself as a pure human being? So you're conflicted, you're in pain, but you can't resist your mission? That's why you said when we first met, Heaven's will is a fool. It's unpredictable. The man in green smiled bitterly again. That's right, Lord Supreme Cloud is wise. He raised his head, his eyes filled with boundless nostalgia as he said softly, I've told myself time and time again that I'm not human. I'm only a wisp of demonic spirit. But, when I was 7 years old, my father and mother died tragically in front of me to protect me. They were chased by their enemies and dug a hole in the ground, placing me in it. They used their own bodies to conceal the existence of the hole. Even when their bodies were hacked to pieces by the enemy, they were still plastered to the hole, allowing me to live. My first master's sect was annihilated. To cover my escape, My master gave up the chance to escape and fought the enemy to buy time, just to buy enough time to escape. In the end, he suffered 93 fatal injuries, but before he died, he still cried out loud, "Don't avenge me." My heart was a foreigner and I didn't care about love. However, by chance, I met a female confidant who gave her heart to me. Wherever I went, she followed. Even though I was disloyal, she was infatuated with me. Later, when I was being hunted, she risked her life to help me and died tragically in my arms. Her only wish before she died was for me to live well and not to think of her. She said she was too ugly. The man in green's gaze was hollow as he stared into the void, murmuring, "I thought I was heartless and shouldn't have feelings." However, who can forget about worldly emotions in this world? What I had to do, the ultimate focus, was to annihilate this world. I didn't even understand myself. On one hand, I felt guilty, on the other I blamed myself. On the other, I lusted after the beauty of the world and enjoyed its warmth. Yet, I went on a killing spree without hesitation, sweeping countless innocent people here and slaughtering them in this valley. I took their blood essence and poured it into the pool of blood. Every once in a while, I would go mad. I would stop being a predetermined person. However, when the pool of blood was about to dry up, even if I didn't want to do it, unwilling to do it, I would still do it involuntarily. I would kill again. The number of lives that have died in my hands all these years has probably exceeded 80 million. 80 million. Hearing the number, Yun Yang and Zhang Wufei shuddered in disbelief. However, recalling the white bones in the valley, the endless white bones that covered the entire ground, the countless white bones that stretched all the way here, Zhang Wufei could not help but sigh. Your parents, your master, your lover, they're all heroes of humanity. Yun Yang felt the same way. Yes, this green-clothed man was a demon in his bones, a demon through and through. However, his parents, his master, and his lover had added a shred of humanity to this devil. If it were not for that, if he had been driven by his instincts, the number of people who had died in this valley would have increased by a few folds. Actually, I've been waiting for this day to come. The man in green smiled faintly. Waiting for the day when my final mission is completed, or the day when I'm discovered by all of you and come knocking on my door. However, before I'm discovered by all of you, I have to be careful with every step I take, to conceal myself, to carry out my mission, my plan. He smiled bitterly. Can you understand? Can you understand what I'm saying? Can you understand? Can you really understand? At this moment, Yun Yang only felt like sighing. Just like what the man in green had asked and suspected, it would be difficult for an ordinary person to understand, but Yun Yang felt that he understood and could understand. However, understanding was one thing, it did not mean that he could accept it. The person in front of him, no matter what his inner thoughts were, was still a wicked demon in his bones. Unforgivable. Lord Supreme Cloud, judging from your posture, you seem to have met me before? Or perhaps you've seen my real body. The green-clothed man was obviously very concerned about this point. Then who am I? Can you tell me? Yun Yang's expression was conflicted as he said, I've seen 4 of you. Each of them has a sky that's exactly the same as yours, even their expressions and smiles are similar. Once Yun Yang's words left his mouth, not only the man in green, even Zhang Wufei was shocked. For what the hell was that? Yun Yang added, not only do you have the same voice and smile, but in my impression, all of you wear the same clothes as well. All of you are dressed in green. The man in green's gaze was already blank while the corners of Zhang Wufei's lips twitched. Now that the situation was clear and both parties were being honest, Yun Yang's words would not be baseless. They must be true. From what Yun Yang had said, the so-called 4 encounters should be 4 times of enmity. Killing a person with the same face 4 times. Was that what he meant? Yun Yang had not lost his mind and suspected that something like this had happened to him. His tolerance was strong indeed. Lord Supreme Cloud, please tell me the details. The man in green said solemnly, I've always wanted to know, what am I? Who am I? The first you I saw was known as the god of wine, the best at brewing wine. The wine he brewed was unparalleled in the world I was born in. The god of wine, Feng Xiang'e, was the legend of the wine world. Yun Yang recalled. I knew how to brew wine too. The man in green was speechless. The wine I brewed was also unparalleled in this world. Many of my resources and information were exchanged through fine wine. Yun Yang's eyes widened for a moment before he said dejectedly, The second you was known as Mr. Nyen. He was the leader of a mysterious organization. I've been his enemy for a long time and fought with him for a long time. I was lucky to be able to win and kill him. It was really not easy. The corners of the man in green's lips twitched. Although I don't have a mysterious organization under me, I've really thought about forming one and being the boss behind the scenes, controlling everything. It was just that my human nature kicked in and I didn't succeed. Now that I think about what I've done, it's not an exaggeration to describe it as mysterious. What I've done is the continent's #1 mystery. So mysterious that I don't even know what I'm doing. If I were to form an organization, I'd call it the Four Seasons Tower. Hidden in the dark throughout the year. The man in green murmured. Yun Yang grimaced. The organization under Mr. Nyen is called the Four Seasons Tower. Jean Wufei was dumbfounded. Am I King listening to the two of you performing a crosstalk? You're the fourth identical face I've seen. Yun Yang said, the third one I saw in the demon race. The demon race's Phoenix Emperor, the Phoenix Emperor. Looks just like you. Phoenix Emperor. Hearing the name, not only was Jean Wufei shocked, even the man in green was shaken. Both of them were shaken at the same time, realization dawning on their faces. So, all of this is the Phoenix Emperor's plot? A plot that has been going on for tens of thousands of years. Yun Yang said softly, that's right. If I'm not mistaken, you should be an insignificant clone that the Phoenix Emperor had cut back then. I wonder how many clones the Phoenix Emperor had cut back then. I'm only a clone, and the most insignificant one at that. The man in green looked conflicted. I can't say for sure. According to what I know, all clones have the ability to be related to the main body. But you obviously don't have this characteristic. Yun Yang was rather speechless. At the same time, he was also wary. How many clones had the Phoenix Emperor cut back then? Why were they coming one after another like chives, one cut after another, as if there was no end to them? The man in green was in a daze for a while before he finally snapped out of it and said, all right then. Since it's come to this and you've all come to me, let's do it and end this once and for all. If I kill all of you, I'll continue with my mission. On the other hand, if I'm killed by all of you, I'll have an easy time. He said with an open mind, after so many years and countless mental struggles, I've had enough of the torture. With a mission to fulfill, even suicide can't do it. I'm really on the verge of breaking down. He chuckled. Kill 1,000 people today, repent and suffer tomorrow, then do good deeds to make up for it, to bring grace to the world and benefit the people. After a while, kill 10,000 people and do good deeds to make up for it. I've had enough of such days. Hearing this, Yun Yang was utterly speechless. It was indeed a miracle to be able to survive until now with such a split personality. Jean Wufei shuddered. Could it be that you're Nyen Chongsheng? The Buddha Nyen Chongsheng of all families? The Buddha Nyen Chongsheng who's been roaming the world for free, practicing medicine and giving medicine, never asking for anything in return, not even asking for medicine money? The Buddha Nyen Chongsheng? Nyen Chongsheng? A devil even more terrifying than Mr. Nyen had actually become the Buddha Nyen? Yun Yang's teeth were aching from listening to this. This Mr. Nyen before him seemed to know how to treat illnesses as well. Yun Yang could not help but recall Feng Xiong's title as the Phantom Physician God of Wine. This was King. The man in green said indifferently, so what if I'm the Buddha Nyen Chongsheng of all families? I've been given many nicknames in the human world. I'm the Buddha Nyen Chongsheng of all families. I'm also the warm-hearted Feng Yisi. I'm also the bloody-handed butcher. I'm also the demonic lord of the Sea of Clouds. I'm also the blood devil who massacred millions of cities in Linhai City in one night. He sighed. The day before I massacred Linhai City, I was still treating a patient in Linhai City. A fair and chubby child hugged my neck and called me grandpa. I was elated. On the second day, I crushed the child to death. Yun Yang sucked in a deep breath. Was it hatred? Was it resentment? He did not have such thoughts, but there was only one thought in his mind right now. This person must not be allowed to live. Jean Wufei, who was standing beside him, had the same thought. What's your cultivation base now? Yun Yang asked in a low voice, his hand on his saber's hilt. The man in green flashed a strange smile that had never been seen before. Supreme Cloud is actually asking me this before the battle? Not only him, Even Zhang Wufei was extremely surprised by Yun Yang's question. Yun Yang said calmly, I truly sympathize with you regarding what you've been through. If you were to continue living like this, the people you've killed will be many and unjustly treated, but you won't be any better off. You being alive is a form of torture in itself. I'm only asking your cultivation base level casually, to predict what method I should use to end this battle as soon as possible and send you to the afterlife. Speak if you want to, it's fine if you don't. But you have to know one thing. Yun Yang's eyes were sparkling. To you, both of us are the true benefactors. Because we're willing to set you free. Set you free. Zhang Wufei felt like he was about to explode with embarrassment when he heard this. You've killed him and you're saying you're helping him. Although this was the right thing to say, but the man in green seemed to agree and said, That's right, that's right. Killing me and freeing me from my fate is indeed a form of release for me. But I won't give up resisting as I carry out my mission. I've said it before, I'll give it my all. Perhaps it'll be you guys who'll be killed by me instead, he frowned and said. No, I can't kill you, Supreme Cloud. You're already a 4th-level Saint Lord. Much stronger than me. I'm only a 3rd-level intermediate. It's just that Zhang Wufei shouldn't have come today. His involvement in this battle will only add to the chaos and make things worse. He's seeking his own death. With the combined might of Soul Demon and I, even if we can't do anything to you, Supreme Cloud, it won't be so easy to protect Zhang Wufei. He smiled faintly. To have a Lord of the Sacred Heart Palace accompany me on my way, at least this battle isn't considered too much of a loss. Zhang Wufei's face darkened and he said angrily, Let's see who's going to send who on his way. You want to kill me? Let's see if you have the ability to do so. Although he said so, his heart was filled with anxiety. This fellow was right. He had tried his best to cultivate all these years, but so far he had only just advanced to the 3rd-level Saint Lord beginner. What if this fellow and Soul Demon fought to the death and attacked him? He could not help but lean closer to Yun Yang. Chapter 1391. Zhang Wufei was filled with misgivings. He could not help but calculate the distance between him and Yun Yang, sighing inwardly. When he first met Yun Yang, the child's cultivation base was only at the level of a royal saint. Zhang Wufei looked down on him, and whatever he said, this fellow could only obey. At that time, he had given him a mission that was close to suicide. He could clearly feel this fellow's reluctance, but because of his subtle pressure, Yun Yang could only go obediently, no matter how reluctant he was. Who would have thought that after only a year and a half, this child had grown so much, and his current cultivation base had already surpassed his own. Now he even needed this child's protection. Sigh, it's a little embarrassing. Zhang Wufei approached Yun Yang, his expression unyielding, but he was muttering inwardly. Should we say that a man who has been away for 3 days should be looked at in a new light? Zhang Wufei had an indescribable feeling in his heart. Sigh. How can it take 30 years? A day apart is like 3 years. Don't worry, Hall Master Zhang. I won't hold a grudge against you for forcing me to go on this mission back then. Yun Yang's gaze did not waver as he said faintly, As long as I'm here, these 2 monsters won't be able to hurt you at all. Zhang Wufei's expression grew darker as he approached Yun Yang and said angrily, I don't need anyone's protection. I'm here to kill the enemy, not to seek protection. He said seriously, I didn't force you back then, and there's still a batch of generous rewards that I haven't had the time to give you. Yun Yang nodded and said, Since Hall Master Zhang's fighting spirit is high, then please take care of yourself. With my 17 to 18 years of experience in the Tao, the combined power of this man in green and the demon soul is not easy to deal with. There's a risk of death at every turn. Zhang Wufei's breath was stuck in his throat, almost choking. Who did not know that these 2 fellows in front of him were not easy to deal with? There was a risk of death at every turn. Your father may lose, but I don't want to lose. Can't I be straightforward? Also, what the hell is with your 17 to 18 years of experience in the Tao? Your father has already been in the Tao for tens of thousands of years. Aren't you mocking your father for wasting my cultivation experience? Besides, I already said that there's another batch of rewards. What's with your attitude? Facing the man in green, Yun Yang was calm and at ease. With his arms behind his back, he took a slow step forward and said faintly, Qingyi, since you have so many names, it's a mess to call this and not that. I shall just call you Qingyi. The blue-clothed man said indifferently, A name is just a mark. You can call it whatever you want. Yun Yang chuckled. Qingyi, I, Yun Yang, have been cultivating since I was young. Since the beginning of my cultivation, I've been invincible among my peers. From the lower realm to the bound of universe, there have been no exceptions. All the enemies I've encountered have been trampled under my feet. I think you'll be no exception. The azure-clothed man was speechless. Our positions are clear, and the battle to the death is imminent. Is it really okay for you to say such nonsense? Yun Yang said, I just want to tell you that you will never be my opponent. While the two were talking, the soul demon, who had been very quiet, suddenly screamed, My lord! At this moment, the soul demon, who had been waiting for the opportunity to make a move, suddenly felt a chill down his spine. If he had hair on his body, it would have been standing on end. Danger! It seemed that some terrible existence had been staring at him. It was the spiritual sense that originated from the soul demon. It was real and not fake. It was the existence of this instinct that allowed the soul demon to dominate for countless years. Back then, the 8 Supreme Saint Masters used the heaven and earth cage to seal the 4 dimensions and 4 directions. The power of 8 different attributes combined to create a killing situation. If it was only Lei Qianli who went easy on him, the soul demon would not be able to save his life. It was because of this instinct that the real body was broken, the vital energy was destroyed, and the heavy attack of the thunder forging could save the remnant of his soul. The azure-clothed man was stunned and then turned to look at Yun Yang. His eyes were full of surprise and doubt. In his knowledge, there were very few things in this world that could restrain the soul demon. The reason why he could be so smooth all the way was because of the soul demon. With the special power of the soul demon, even ordinary Saint Masters would find it difficult to deal with it. Now that the soul demon was trembling, how could the azure-clothed man not be surprised and surprised? He swept his mental power and could not help but be stunned. After a while, the azure-clothed man said in a low voice, Lord Supreme Cloud is very scheming. You pulled me to talk and let me focus all my mental power on you, but in fact, you have secretly made arrangements to completely eliminate the possibility of my counterattack. Yun Yang smiled and said, Likewise. The azure-clothed man's response is also not bad. While we were talking, he secretly released the Phoenix Emperor's other mental power. Isn't he preparing to take advantage of the gap and kill us? The azure-clothed man snorted coldly and murmured, Is it the Phoenix Emperor's mental power? Yun Yang paused and said in confusion, This is also what I can't figure out so far. No matter how powerful the Phoenix Emperor is, attaching 2 forces to you, how can it be preserved after thousands of years and nearly 10,000 years? The azure-clothed man snorted angrily and hesitated to speak. After a moment of contemplation, he said with some resentment, The 2 forces are no different from me in nature. They are rooted as one. Outsiders can't detect them, but they are not under my control. Yun Yang was surprised at first, but after careful consideration, he felt that this was reasonable. The azure-clothed man was the Phoenix Emperor's clone. His cultivation method and physical attributes were naturally the same as hers, and they were naturally compatible with the attributes of the 2 forces. If the 2 forces were integrated into the azure-clothed man's body, his current cultivation base would definitely be more than what it was now. However, the 2 forces were one-time explosive attacks, so it was reasonable that it was difficult to separate and absorb them. As he spoke, the azure-clothed man's body suddenly swayed and actually split into 2. One held a saber, the other wielded a sword. His expression was still indifferent and elegant. The next moment, the one with the saber rushed toward Yun Yang first, while the one with the sword turned into a grey fog with the soul demon with a howl and rushed toward Zhang Wufei. The 2 clones attacking separately was already an unexpected turn of events. At least, it was beyond most people's expectations. As for the saber-wielding azure-clothed man, he had integrated a strange energy into the saber when he was halfway there, causing the saber's power to suddenly increase by no less than 10 times. As the saber advanced, the inexplicable power continued to increase. In an instant, an unprecedented demonic aura reverberated in the mountain's belly, filling the air. Zhang Wufei roared, a giant sword appearing in his hand. With a wave of his head, a wave of sword energy illuminated the entire mountain's belly in an instant. It was unstoppable, but under the joint attack of the 2 opponents, he was forced to retreat, falling into a disadvantageous position. With a loud clang, the saber in Yun Yang's hand clashed with the opponent's saber. Both of them trembled violently as if they had been electrocuted, retreating at the same time. Yun Yang paled and quickly stopped his retreat. He retreated and advanced again, his saber slashing forward. His opponent did the same, advancing instead of retreating. He was even a step faster than Yun Yang, the sharp edge of his saber almost reaching the top of Yun Yang's head. After the long saber had been integrated with the Phoenix Emperor's power, the cultivation base of the man in green seemed to have advanced by 2 big steps, reaching the pinnacle of the 4th level and even showing signs of surpassing it. After another head-on clash, Yun Yang retreated again, but his opponent was still relentless. His saber slashed again and again like a storm. For a moment, Yun Yang was forced into a disadvantageous position. As the battle continued, the opponent's long saber gradually had notches on it. In less than 10 breaths, it had become like a saw. However, the material of the opponent's saber itself was also unusual. Since the beginning of the battle, it had collided with the divine edge at least a few hundred times, but there were only a few notches and it had not been broken. It should be known that each of their current attacks was a strong attack without any fuss, truly powerful and heavy. Faced with such a ferocious attack, Yun Yang did not even have the time to use Saber Truth, Destiny Blade, and was immediately caught in a series of attacks that were like a storm. Yun Yang was not willing to accept the current situation. With a long howl, he mustered all his strength and slashed 3 times consecutively against the edge of the opponent's saber. His body retreated 500 feet like a kite with a broken string. Enduring the numbness in his arms, he quickly converted his depleted mystical chi into endless chi. His saber extended once more, Saber Truth. Destiny Blade was unleashed. Merciless Blade. Merciless Tao. Yun Yang's sudden manifestation of divine edge. Even though it was a hurried attack, its power was only half of what it usually was. He was still at a disadvantage, but he had successfully restrained the man in green's attack. When the second attack came, both parties were already on par. Even though the man in green's offensive power still had the upper hand, Saber Truth, Destiny Blade had already greatly compensated for this deficiency. As he turned the tables, Yun Yang quickly realized a fact. Although the Phoenix Emperor's demonic energy that was attached to the saber was powerful, it could not be fully controlled by the man in green. Instead, its main purpose was to increase the saber's power. It had little to do with the person wielding the saber. It was also because of this force that the saber's resistance had increased tremendously, allowing it to fight against the divine edge without breaking. After realizing this, Yun Yang became even more skilled in dealing with the man in green. Although it was difficult to kill the man in green with the help of the Phoenix Emperor's demonic energy, Yun Yang gradually gained the upper hand as he executed Saber Truth, Destiny Blade. As long as he could sustain this for a while longer, it would be enough to turn his advantage into victory. "You're finished," Yun Yang hollered. The more Yun Yang fought, the more comfortable he became. On the other side, Zhang Wufei was in a sorry state, and the more he fought, the more difficult it was to deal with. Although the man in green's doppelganger had successfully split into 2 and could fight on both sides, his combat power was inevitably reduced. The real combat power that had reached the 3rd level of the Saint Monarch was now only at the peak of the 2nd level of the Saint Monarch. The Soul Demon's cultivation base was even worse, only at the peak of the 1st level of the Saint Monarch. Simply based on the combined combat power of these 2 guys, it was impossible to pose any threat to Zhang Wufei, who had the cultivation base of the 3rd level of the Saint Monarch. But the reality was the complete opposite of this situation. The Soul Demon and the other man in green's doppelganger's cultivation base and combat power were not as good, but the 2 of them seemed to have form but not substance. No matter how hard Zhang Wufei hit them, they would not suffer any damage. They would only dissipate like smoke and then reassemble, completely unharmed. Moreover, it was not clear where they would reassemble. No matter where they reassembled, they could be hit fiercely. At first, Zhang Wufei relied on his own cultivation base to suppress the opponent, but no matter how hard he attacked, he fell into a complete disadvantage in the face of the opponent's strange fighting style. Fortunately, Zhang Wufei was also someone who had been through great enemies for a long time. He instantly understood each other's strengths and weaknesses and switched from offense to defense, focusing on defense, gritting his teeth and holding on. In Zhang Wufei's mind, no matter what, he was still a hallmaster and could not be underestimated. The opponent's cultivation method was unique. Attacking forcefully would be futile and a waste of energy. Instead, focusing on defense would increase the chance of survival. As long as he could drag on a little longer, Yun Yang would have more time to deal with the other doppelganger. On the contrary, if Yun Yang were to come over to help now, it would become 2 people against 3 opponents. His state would probably not improve much either. Did he not see that the doppelganger over there was more powerful? More aggressive in attack? It was not difficult for that attack to kill him with a single slash. He could not let him come over. With a loud bang, Zhang Wufei's left shoulder was struck. As the saying went, a prolonged defense was bound to be lost. The man in green and Soul Demon's attacks were strange and inexplicable. After a series of intensive attacks, he was finally hit. Zhang Wufei stumbled backwards after being hit, then was kicked again. He tried his best to keep his composure and mustered his remaining strength to protect his entire body. Unexpectedly, he felt another wave of pain. His calf had been stabbed by a sword. Your father will fight with you. Zhang Wufei was in pain, discomfort, and embarrassment. No matter what, he was the Sacred Heart Palace's hall master. He could not shout for help. He could not afford to lose face like that. He gritted his teeth and puffed his cheeks. The golden saber in his hand turned into a cloud of saber clouds, weaving and whistling as it protected his entire body. He said he was fighting with his opponent, but in fact, he was exerting all his strength to ensure that he would not lose and defend himself to the end. The next moment, with a loud bang, Soul Demon's ferocious attack caused Zhang Wufei's saber web to slow down for a moment. Although it was slight, the man in green's doppelganger still took the opportunity to advance. As the sword flashed, it left another bloody gash on Zhang Wufei's thigh. Zhang Wufei screamed, his whole body trembling, but he still brandished his saber in all directions. The saber light flew around his body, still protecting him to the end. But the next moment, it was the man in green's doppelganger who entered with his sword. The sword and saber clashed head-on. Zhang Wufei's third-grade Saint Monarch cultivation was more than a level higher than the doppelganger in front of him. When the saber and sword clashed, he was naturally not at a disadvantage. But after a head-on clash, the saber light protecting him still revealed a few flaws. Soul Demon then took advantage of this and struck 3 times, causing Zhang Wufei to spit out blood. Sect Leader Yun! Zhang Wufei shouted. I can't hold on anymore. It's too painful. Should I call for help? I accompanied my wife to Chengdu for 3 days. In the end, it rained for 3 days. I went to see the pandas, and only saw a few panda butts, not a single face. Speaking of which, before I went, a Chengdu reader called me and told me, pandas are overflowing in Chengdu now. They've all rushed home from the mountains. There are too many. Pandas can be raised now. You can buy one at home for a small amount of money. There are a few unscrupulous fellows around him who swore. I discussed with my wife on the way. How many months old should we buy? How much is the budget? How to bring it back? If it doesn't work, rent a car? In the end, after we went, this reader didn't show up. I asked others, where can I buy a panda? Cough cough. I'll leave the rest to my imagination. It's so embarrassing. Chapter 1392. As Zhang Wufei staggered back, the Soul Demon took advantage of the victory to pursue. A strand of soul power had already wrapped around his right leg, and with a sudden tug, even though Zhang Wufei had already used the 1000 catty drop to stabilize his body, a cold sword shot straight at his heart, forcing Zhang Wufei to turn his body to avoid it. In the end, there was a big bloody wound on the side of his waist. Zhang Wufei roared, the power of a 3rd-level Holy Lord exploding in an instant. He struggled to break free from the Soul Demon's restraint and rolled 100 feet away, shouting with a pale face, Yun Yang! Hurry up! It was as if Yun Yang had not heard anything. His saber danced up and down, completely suppressing the clone of the man in green. His saber glinted, radiating light in all directions. Yun Yang looked dashing and elegant as he said, Hold on a little longer, Palace Master. I will be done very soon. Do your best. Zhang Wufei was angry, anxious, and helpless. But, your father can't do it anymore. Another cry rang out. His thigh was stabbed again, and a piece of flesh flew out with a swoosh. From start to finish, just his thigh alone had suffered 3 to 4 slashes. His flesh was badly mangled, and his leg was covered in cuts and bruises. Hurry up! I can't hold on any longer. Zhang Wufei looked at Yun Yang's situation and was close to tears. At such a dangerous time, you're still F*** playing around there. You still say you don't hate me. Yun Yang forced the clone of the man in green to retreat with a single slash and chased after it with a shout. 3 consecutive slashes slashed the man in green's body, making it difficult for him to continue. He shouted encouragingly, "Palace Lord is mighty. Show your domineering spirit and kill them." Jean Wufei wanted to cry but had no tears. "Kill them? I want to even in my dreams. But I really can't do it." As Jean Wufei's mind cleared up, he could not help but snap back to reality as he shouted in exasperation. "Yun Yang, even if you want to take revenge on me for forcing you to join the demon race, don't pick this moment to do it. F***ck me." As he was distracted shouting, he was punched by the soul demon again. As the battle went on, Jean Wufei's combat power grew weaker. Even though the soul demon's cultivation base was mediocre, it was still painful to be punched. He leaned towards Yun Yang with all his might, but Yun Yang dodged and swung his saber. With a loud cry, he turned in another direction and moved another 100 feet away. Jean Wufei almost vomited blood. "Oh yeah," Yun Yang chuckled and said. "Hallmaster, please don't measure the heart of a gentleman with your own mean measure. How can I, the heaven and earth supreme cloud, be that kind of person? A gentleman doesn't remember the past. A gentleman doesn't remember the past. Hallmaster, how many rewards do I have?" If Jean Wufei still did not understand, he would not be worthy of being the Lord of the Sacred Heart Palace. He shouted with all his might, "Lord Supreme Cloud. As many as you say. F***ck me. Save me, Lord Supreme Cloud." Yun Yang said sheepishly, "You're the Sacred Heart Palace Lord, calling me Lord Supreme Cloud. I'm a little embarrassed. Lord Supreme Cloud." Jean Wufei felt like committing suicide. He was so anxious that his mouth was foaming. I apologize to you. I shouldn't have forced you to join the demon clan." Yun Yang snorted coldly and raised his saber again, causing the man in green to stagger. At the same time he whistled. The whistle was still ringing when a flash of green suddenly appeared in the belly of the mountain. A vine, like a dancing snake, suddenly appeared in front of Jean Wufei. The man in green sword clone and the soul demon had a tacit understanding, working together seamlessly. They were about to attack again and kill Jean Wufei as soon as possible, but with the sudden appearance of the vine, the soul demon suddenly cried out in shock. He hurriedly withdrew his power and retreated as if he had seen a ghost. At this moment, if he had been in human form, he would have shown an appearance of being scared out of his wits. The man in green was also completely unprepared for this change. His tacit cooperation with the soul demon had suddenly disappeared. In his shock, he could not help but react a little slower. Jean Wufei's golden saber flashed with thunder and lightning, falling violently with great momentum. Half of the man in green's clone, who could not escape in time, was chopped off by the saber. "You!" The other clone roared angrily. "Brother Soul, what are you doing?" At this moment, the man in green was both shocked and angry, and his usual indifference was gone. It was a pity that the soul demon had no intention of paying attention to him now. He fled desperately in a panic, hoping to find a way to escape. His whole mind was in a mess. Oh my God! A deadly natural enemy had appeared. Although he did not know what it was, one thing was certain. This thing could eat him alive, and it would not take any effort. The so-called stubborn resistance and barely holding on did not exist at all. He was now full of panic, out of his wits, and in a state of panic. To the man in green shout, "Fight! What fight? There was no such thing. I'm about to die. What the F***ck am I going to fight?" The man in green could not have imagined that in a battle of life and death, his best partner, who had always cooperated seamlessly, would actually have such a situation. He could not help but curse in his heart. "Fight, brother. What the hell is wrong with you? You look like your soul has left your body." The soul demon fled desperately, scurrying all over the mountainside, but no matter where it fled, Emmy would chase after it like a shadow, and the result of each chase was to swallow a little more or less of the soul demon's energy. The soul energy was lost bit by bit, and the soul demon, which was difficult to repair, became more and more frightened. Emmy, on the other hand, was full of joy. "Waha, this time. Will I be able to eat my fill?" "Ayaya. Don't run. Let me eat. Woo woo woo." Soul demon now only had one mind to escape, but after fleeing for a long time, he was desperate to find that every exit of the mountain had been covered by this little green guy's energy. Running into it was just throwing oneself into a trap. Mamma mia. It's terrible. How could there be such a terrible guy? At this time, the soul demon was not only panicked, but its vitality was also badly damaged. It could no longer turn invisible, so it appeared like a cloud of dark mist. There was a figure hidden in it. Occasionally, it turned into a human face, but it was the kind that was panicked and scared to death. Ayaya. Don't run too fast, don't run too slow. Too fast, I eat less, too slow, I choke easily. The soul demon wanted to cry but had no tears. Finally it hissed, "What is this thing?" There was a sobbing tone in its voice. This time, even Zhang Wufei was shocked. That was the soul demon known as the world's most ominous creature. How could it be so useless? And he had never heard the soul demon speak before. Didn't it say a word all the time? If there were others present at this time, it was inevitable that they would complain again and again. Lord Temple Lord, your focus is wrong. Of course the soul demon could speak. Yunyang had long known this. Last time, this guy had talked to Dong Qitian. It was just that the last time Emmy's power level was not as high as it was now, and at that time, he did not know that Emmy was the natural enemy of such a legendary ominous creature. But today, it was the end of the soul demon, and there was no chance of survival. The clone of the man in green who was fighting with Zhang Wufei had half of his body cut off by Zhang Wufei's saber. Although he had used the secret method to restore his body, his cultivation base was only at the peak of the second level of Saint Monarch. After this injury, his combat power was inevitably reduced. Although Zhang Wufei had been injured before and was covered with cuts and bruises, it was only a flesh wound. At this moment, his momentum was like a rainbow, suppressing the sword clone of the man in green. Yunyang also had the upper hand, and the victory was obvious. Not to mention Emmy on the third battlefield, it was directly crushing, chasing, intercepting, and annihilating the soul demon. Seeing that their side was about to win a great victory, suddenly there was a sudden sigh in the air. Before the sigh finished speaking, the two green-clothed men began to spin. With a whoosh, they landed on the altar. As they spun rapidly like a whirlwind, they turned back into one person. The green-clothed man's scholarly appearance reappeared. Looking at Yunyang and Zhang Wufei again, his face was full of helplessness, saying, "I lost this battle. But can Lord Supreme Cloud tell me what this green light is? The variables of this battle are all on this thing, so that the outcome of the battle can be reversed." Yunyang looked at the gray and green lights that were still in pursuit and said lightly, "This is my partner, Partner. Partner." Emmy cried joyfully and rushed to the soul demon with its fangs and claws. "Ayaya. I am a partner, do you hear me?" The soul demon was speechless. None of the three men made another move. They just stood quietly, watching the green light frantically chase the soul demon, from east to west, from south to north. After each round, Emmy would take a bite, like a child that was filled with energy and did not know fatigue, playing an extremely fun game in high spirits and tirelessly. Chase, chase, chase. When it caught up, it would take a bite. If it couldn't catch up, it would take a small bite. Emmy was having a great time. It was getting more and more energetic. The soul demon, on the other hand, was getting more and more dispirited and desperate. From the solid gray fog at the beginning of the chase to now, the gray fog had become much thinner. A touch of sorrow appeared on the pale face of the man in green. He sighed and said, "The soul demon, known as indestructible, is finished." Zhang Wufei snorted, showing the demeanor of an expert. He said faintly, "This is the destined end. It should have died a long time ago. If Lei Qianli hadn't let it go, how could it have lingered on for so many years?" The man in green glanced at Zhang Wufei with an extremely contemptuous gaze and said faintly, "Borrowing the strength of others, being generous at others' expense. If Lord Supreme Cloud wasn't here today," Zhang Wufei said lightly, "Lord Supreme Cloud's residence of 9 Supremes is under my Sacred Heart Palace." The implication was self-evident. The man in green flashed a meaningful smile but no longer lingered on the topic. He just looked at the long saber in his hand that had become sawtooth and could break at any time and sighed softly. "It's finally over." The soul demon was still roaring, running for its life, struggling to survive, but its body at this moment, the gray fog's phenomenon, was becoming more and more chaotic. "Help! I don't want to die. Help me! Don't chase me anymore. Spare me. Ayaya." Emmy was still full of excitement, one bite after another, one bite after another. Zhang Wufei sighed softly with some mixed emotions. This soul demon is known as the scourge of the world that even saint masters are helpless against. It devours lives and souls from time to time, and now it has ended up like this. It's the cycle of karma indeed. It's not that it's not retribution, it's just that the time hasn't come yet. It was truly an indescribable feeling. In the past, the soul demon that was born in the bound of universe was fearless of blades, spears, water, fire, mystical chi, and energy. It was practically fearless of nothing. Even if a saint master sealed it, it would be difficult to completely annihilate it. A moment of carelessness would allow it to escape. It was truly a monstrous creature. If it were not for its unique attribute that made it immortal and unable to elevate its cultivation base to surpass the level of a saint master, it would have been an apocalyptic catastrophe. In the past, when the soul demon was at its peak, it even had a battle record of almost exhausting a saint master to death. In the bound of universe at that time, it was almost an unsolvable existence. If it were not for Dong Qitian and the other 7 experts putting in all their effort to combine the power of 8 different attributes to form the most targeted death nemesis situation, it would have been impossible to temporarily extinguish this creature's arrogance. Now the nightmare had reappeared in the world, but it was reduced to being tortured little by little, to the point where it was about to be tortured into ashes. Moreover, he was fortunate enough to witness this process with his own eyes. What a feast for the eyes! The man in green smiled faintly. Everything has its vanquisher. This is the truth of heaven and earth. Sure enough, there is no reason to talk about it. He said softly, "Soul, don't make unnecessary resistance. It's meaningless. Accept your fate." Upon hearing the man in green's words, the soul demon let out a cry full of despair, trembling all over as it stopped. Immediately, a dark green vine wrapped around it. The soul demon's soul body, which was no longer solid, was thinning at a speed visible to the naked eye, becoming transparent and faintly discernible. Finally, with another roar of despair, it completely turned into nothingness. The man in green laughed and said slowly, "A lifetime of hard work, a lifetime of hard work for others. A remnant of a soul has no heart, but the heavens have given it a heart of gold. Unwilling demonic nature, unwilling to suffer, not daring to be tender, not daring to be kind, perished today." In the end, he did not finish and smiled. "Supreme Cloud, this is yours." Before his voice trailed off, his entire body exploded into a mist of blood with a bang. Even the power of his deific consciousness exploded completely at the same time. There was no trace of him left in this life. Forever annihilated. Zhang Wufei, who had been struggling to hold on because of his heavy injuries, saw that the enemy was gone. He relaxed and sat on the ground at once, sighing softly and murmuring, "How satisfying! It seems that he has lived long enough and suffered enough psychological torture. But he still retained the power of self-destruction in the end. Why didn't he kill himself earlier?" Yun Yang rolled his eyes and said, "I don't understand more and more now how you can become the leader of the Sacred Heart Palace. You don't even have this little ability to understand? Before us, there were 2 Phoenix Monarch forces that were not under his control. With those 2 forces, how could he have succeeded in committing suicide?" As soon as he had this thought, he would be completely imprisoned, living a life worse than death. Zhang Wufei hummed and said, "He could only die after exhausting those 2 forces. That Phoenix Monarch is really evil," Yun Yang said coldly. "Compared to your lamentation, shouldn't you be thanking that man in green more?" Zhang Wufei's eyes widened and he said in surprise, "What? I'm thanking him? Why?" Yun Yang glared at him and said coldly, "You said it yourself, he still has the final power of self-detonation. Although the previous round of battle has wiped out his combat power, you know how powerful the final power of self-detonation is. If he were to risk his life and try to bring you along with him, what do you think the outcome would be?" Zhang Wufei was speechless. After a while, he was drenched in cold sweat, drenching his clothes. Yun Yang rolled his eyes and said, "My reward should be at least 10 million pieces of supreme-grade spiritual jade, right?" He had said that it would be as much as he said it would be. Zhang Wufei spat out a mouthful of blood. His expression weary. "Just kill me. I don't have money, but I have my life." Chapter 1393. Yun Yang smiled faintly and winked. "Trying to go back on your word?" Zhang Wufei's face flushed red as he said angrily, 10 million pieces of superb grade. You can't afford it even if you behead me. Even the East Celestial Palace can't afford 10 million pieces of superb grade. You're just being unreasonable." Yun Yang stroked his chin. How much can you afford then? Jean Wufei said stiffly. 5,000. Yun Yang was amazed. Temple Lord Jean, you really shouldn't be the Temple Lord of the Sacred Heart Palace. You should go to the General Commerce League. I bid 10 million and you counterbid 5,000? Aren't you embarrassed? Jean Wufei replied calmly. I don't have that much. Let's both take a step back. 9,500,000. What do you think? No. Jean Wufei shouted angrily. Yun Yang pressed on. 9 million. No. 800. No. 700. Finally, when it reached 1 million, Jean Wufei's gaze flickered despite his firm stance. Hence, Yun Yang bid on the number, refusing to budge no matter what. Jean Wufei wanted to leave, but Yun Yang grabbed him and pressed him to the ground. You want to leave? Can you beat me? Jean Wufei wanted to cry. You're a bully. Yes, you're right. You have to take this 1 million even if you don't want it. Even if you have to sell your wife and daughter. You have to give it to me. To make up for my loss. Yun Yang pressed for the debt. I don't have a daughter. Then sell it. Cut the nonsense. Let me tell you, this isn't the only battle. This is just an appetizer. We'll be on the same side in the battle against the demons in the future. Yun Yang threatened. Think about it. You've made a bid this time. It's like you've found a super bodyguard. What do you think? Jean Wufei's eyes darted around. This. 1 million. I really don't have any. Jean Wufei groaned. Let me put it this way. Plundering the entire Sacred Heart Palace, there'll only be 700,000 to 800,000 pieces at most, and you still have to ensure everyone's cultivation. You're asking for my life, drinking my blood, and gnawing on my flesh. 600,000. Yun Yang's eyes were gleaming. This fellow really had that much money. He had originally planned to extort 100 or 200,000, but he didn't expect to find such a big fat sheep. 600,000. Jean Wufei's eyes flickered. If it doesn't work out, we'll call it quits. Yun Yang's gaze was threatening. After pondering for a long time, Jean Wufei finally said helplessly, 600,000 it is then. Let me make this clear, this is your mission reward, not some random name. As long as you give me the money, I'll do it under any name. Yun Yang grinned from ear to ear. I'm rich. Another stroke. Humph, you, Jean Wufei, forced me to go on a mission. You didn't expect this day to come, right? Let me say this first, in the future battle against the demon race. Jean Wufei said righteously. We need to help each other. Understand? Help each other, my ass. Yun Yang said, hand over the supreme class spiritual jade first, and then we'll talk about the rest, lest you get something for nothing. Jean Wufei sighed faintly. So you used to call me Hall Master Jean. Hall Master. Now that my cultivation has increased, you call me an old brat. Yun Yang rolled his eyes and ignored him. He then looked towards the altar. The blood fog had already dissipated. Yun Yang took a step forward and stared at the 8 pools of blood, as well as the altar in the middle. He said faintly, the most evil thing in this place should be this. Although the man in cyan was dead, the blood in the 8 blood pools was still bubbling. Countless streams of blood mist were still rising, slowly moving towards the altar in the middle. With a wave of his hand, all the blood in the 8 pools flew up at his command, turning into a crimson torrent in the air as it gushed out of the mountain. In just a moment, the originally brimming pools of blood were now empty. The two of them looked down again and saw that there were pieces of demon crystal jade pendants, and each crystal was engraved with a strange pattern. Yun Yang's mind raced. He did not destroy all the demonic crystals, but kept them all instead. Jean Wufei had wanted to take some. These demonic crystals were all treasures. If he took some, it could make up for his loss. Who would have thought that he would be a step too late? The countless demonic crystals had already been swept clean, and he could not help but be stunned. These things are useless to you anyway. Don't waste your effort. Yun Yang was all smiles, full of kindness. Jean Wufei was already cursing in his heart. You've taken them all. How do you know that I'm useless? You should at least leave some soup for me if you eat the meat, however. Yun Yang's gaze was very strange, filled with a sense of danger that he could beat him up at any time, even waving his fist in front of him. Thinking back to what had happened earlier, how could he not be sensible? He nodded and said, Not bad at all. The Sacred Heart Palace has no use for such evil things. Yun Yang took a step forward and grabbed the entire altar. As expected, there was an exquisite soul-devouring tree hidden under the altar. It was only 3 feet tall, but its branches and leaves were crystal clear. Under the soul-devouring tree, there was a whole piece of demonic soul jade crystal. It was hundreds of feet wide and hundreds of feet thick. Just such a large piece of demonic soul jade crystal was already a great fortune. Zhang Wufei's eyes were green with envy. F***CKME. If this piece of demonic soul jade crystal was given to me, I would be able to break through to the 4th level of the Saint Monarch realm in no time. There was also the small emerald green tree on top of it. It was obviously a rare spiritual plant, a priceless treasure. Zhang Wufei went over to take a closer look at the huge piece of demonic crystal. He found that there were countless thin lines carved on the demonic soul jade crystal, forming a huge, complicated picture. The picture was full of an enchanting aura. Although it was just a glance, it was enough to make one's heart waver. Yun Yang sighed and said, "It really is this thing. So dangerous, so dangerous." Hearing Yun Yang's words, Zhang Wufei immediately became cautious and asked cautiously, "What is this thing? Have you seen it before?" Yun Yang sighed and said, "Do you still remember the things that I mentioned when I came back from the realm of demons?" Zhang Wufei quivered and said, "That underground prison? Soul-devouring tree?" Yun Yang pointed at the small tree below and said, "That's right, this small tree is the soul-devouring tree." Zhang Wufei's face turned pale at once. The lines carved on this huge demonic soul jade crystal should be a complete formation. 999 formations converging to form a huge formation. Its power is unimaginable. I reckon that there's a high chance that this is a stronghold that the demon race has been planning for a long time to launch a counterattack on the continent. Fortunately, we discovered it early. Yun Yang sighed softly. Otherwise, it might not take long for the demon clan to use this place as a base and invade the bound of universe. The first to bear the brunt would be the Sacred Heart Palace. Zhang Wufei was drenched in cold sweat, obviously realizing the severity of the situation. Then, he saw Yun Yang put away the small tree and the demonic soul jade crystal with a wave of his hand. He said in a low voice, "These things are too dangerous. Even if they were placed in the Sacred Heart Palace, I wouldn't feel at ease. I'd better keep them." Zhang Wufei blinked and looked at his empty hands, thoughts surging in his mind. "I've come all this way, risking my life and ending up with wounds all over my body, but in the end, I'm still empty-handed? I've actually owed such a huge debt. You should at least give me something, shouldn't you?" Zhang Wufei frowned and looked at Yun Yang in dissatisfaction. There was an inexplicable sourness in his heart. "I found a gold mine with someone else. Even if we split it equally, we'd still be 2 of the richest men in the world. But in the end, I didn't even get a single grain of gold." Zhang Wufei gritted his teeth. Yun Yang's expression tightened as he said, "What are you saying, Temple Lord? What an imposing manner. It's exactly the same as when you forced me to join the demon race back then. That face, it doesn't allow any rejection. I've always been loyal to this matter. Yes, always loyal." Zhang Wufei stared at Yun Yang and murmured, "The truth has proven that entering the demon race was a great opportunity for you. You've gained a huge benefit." Yun Yang nodded kindly. "You're right, Temple Lord. If there's a benefit, we should share it with our own people. I've decided to share this benefit with Temple Lord Zhan. We'll depart tomorrow to the Bloody Soul Mountain, and Temple Lord Zhan, you'll go over." Zhang Wufei straightened his expression and said seriously, "I was just joking. I don't know anything about these things. It'd be a waste if I really took it. You can only make the best use of it if you take it." Yun Yang asked doubtfully, "Really? Temple Lord Zhan really doesn't want any of it? That's not good, is it?" Zhang Wufei nodded. "How is it not good? It's very good, very good. As the saying goes, a good seller knows his place. You know your place. It'd be a waste if you gave it to me." Yun Yang's face was full of shame. "Temple Lord, you're so generous. You have the demeanor of an expert indeed. I'm impressed." Zhang Wufei wiped his sweat. "Shall we go back? There's still Lei Qianli at the Sacred Heart Palace." Yun Yang nodded. Of course. Let's go. I've had enough of this place." The matter of letting Temple Lord Zhan go to the demonic realm was never to be mentioned again. Towards such a sensible person, It was enough to just point it out. There was no need for more words. Both of them took a few steps forward before Yun Yang swung his arm abruptly. With a loud explosion, the altar and the pool of blood were blasted into smithereens. Then, the entire mountain collapsed as well, causing the entire mountain to collapse. Yun Yang and Zhang Wufei flew out like lightning, sticking close to the ground and leaving a trail of dust behind them. In the Sacred Heart Palace, the usually calm and cunning Lei Qianli looked hopeless as he stared at Yun Yang and Zhang Wufei in front of him. His lips, which had always been eloquent, only moved, but he could not say a word. He knew that no amount of eloquence could bring him a chance of survival at this moment. He was now a fish on the chopping block, one that was almost certain to be destroyed. Zhang Wufei took a deep breath. Since we've known each other for a while, what else do you want to say now? Lei Qianli chuckled bitterly. After some time, he finally spoke in a hoarse voice. I only have one question for Lord Supreme Cloud. May I ask, when did you start suspecting me? I know that my identity was already exposed during the last incident in the city, but what about before that? I thought that my actions were flawless, but judging from Lord Supreme Cloud's actions, you've been suspecting this old man from the Sacred Heart Palace since the beginning. Yun Yang smiled faintly, his thoughts suddenly drifting far away. He said, to you, I have a say in both public and private matters. Privately, you're already one of my destined enemies even before I ascended to the bound of universe. But when it comes to suspecting you and targeting you as a suspect, since I accidentally met the soul demon, you've become my only suspect. Lei Qianli's eyes were full of puzzlement. With Supreme Cloud's remarkable ability, he found out that I was in cahoots with the soul demon. Naturally, he could lock me in as a suspect. It does make sense that I've fallen, but, before you ascended, how did you form a grudge with me? You didn't know me then, did you? Supreme Thunder's face flitted across Yun Yang's eyes, and he could not help saying slowly, you've got two things wrong. First, I've seen the soul demon long before tonight's city, and the reason why I suspect your identity is because the 8 experts successfully besieged the soul demon that year, and the soul demon that should have died was not eliminated. You, who were responsible for the final thunder forging, are of course the biggest suspect. Secondly, the source of the grudge between you and me is probably just because your surname is Lei. Hearing Yun Yang's sudden words, Lei Qianli was stunned, but there was a little bit of understanding. Zhang Wufei exhaled and said, Lei Qianli, do you think your heart won't hurt after killing so many Sacred Heart Palace brothers for your own selfish desires? At this moment, shouldn't you make up for your disgust and tell me all the secrets you know? Otherwise, how can you face your former comrades when you go to the underworld? Lei Qianli lifted his head abruptly and looked at Zhang Wufei, smiling strangely. Lei Qianli had never been a person who was willing to give in. After the fierce battle just now, Lei Qianli had already been covered with cuts and bruises, and he no longer had the strength to resist. He was not dead yet, probably because Zhang Wufei hoped to get some information from Lei Qianli. After all, the Sacred Heart Palace had lost too much on Lei Qianli. Zhang Wufei's eyes were fixed on Lei Qianli's face. Lei Qianli smiled and said, now that things have come to this, what more can I say? I was never a part of the Sacred Heart Palace from the beginning. Everything I did was for a reason, and this is my stance. I can't even say the word sorry to the Sacred Heart Palace. He smiled faintly and said, let me keep my dignity. Before his voice trailed off, Lei Qianli's entire body started burning. Yun Yang did not move. Neither did Zhang Wufei. What Lei Qianli was displaying now was another ability that only a Saint Lord could possess. He used his own Jindan essence to ignite the fire, using his soul as fuel. Once he moved, there was no way to save him, let alone put him out. In front of the two of them, Lei Qianli ignited his soul, his aged face flickering in the firelight. Wisps of green smoke rose, and suddenly, a weak voice could be heard from the fire. Actually, back then, I was controlled on purpose. In the firelight, his eyes showed the last traces of nostalgia, or even love. Before Yun Yang and Zhang Wufei could see it clearly, they were completely engulfed by the fire. In an instant, they turned into a pile of white ash, without a trace of life left. Chapter 1394. Zhang Wufei heaved a long sigh. Yun Yang's eyes did not waver as he said, there's no need to sigh for a dead man who is a spy and an enemy. What's your next step, Temple Master Zhang? Zhang Wufei replied, it's just preparing for battle. The war between humans and demons is imminent. The Sacred Heart Palace can only fight. Zhan Wufei said. Yun Yang smiled. I don't know if Temple Master Zhan has ever thought that the residents of 9 Supremes may be aiming for the palace-level celestial luck banner next time. Zhan Wufei was silent for a moment before he said, I really haven't thought about it. Although the residence of 9 Supremes has a strong foundation, its comprehensive strength is insufficient, and it doesn't have that kind of stable strength for the time being. Of course, if you think you're strong enough at that time and the war hasn't started, we can fight with the residents of 9 Supremes. Yun Yang asked, what if the war has already started? Zhan Wufei said faintly, if it's already a war, the Sacred Heart Palace will admit defeat and give up the celestial luck banner. Yun Yang laughed. Temple Master Zhan is really generous. You prioritize the survival of the human race. I'm very impressed. I'll take my leave now. We'll meet again. Zhan Wufei smiled as he watched Yun Yang's figure disappear in front of him. See you again. However, Yun Yang's figure that had just disappeared suddenly appeared in front of Zhan Wufei. There's something. Before we say goodbye, the 600,000? Zhan Wufei was stunned. What do you mean? With a swoosh, Yun Yang drew his saber. What do you think? Zhan Wufei laughed and said boldly, I've been ready for a long time. Come with me. I didn't expect things to go so smoothly. It's so easy. Shangguan Lingxiu could not help sighing as she accompanied Yun Yang on the way back. After coming, the spy was found. I thought there would be a debate. It seemed that it was a pity that there were no twists and turns. Yun Yang smiled bitterly. You only saw the Sacred Heart Palace. You didn't know that the danger this time may not be under all the previous encounters. If I hadn't come in person this time, and I didn't have the means to restrain Soul Demon, all the members of the Sacred Heart Palace would have been wiped out, and the progress of the Demon Clan's plan would not have been hindered too much. In this way, the war between the two clans has not started, and the Xianhuang human clan has already suffered a great loss. Yun Yang was not exaggerating at all. It was the truth. The Soul Demon and the man in green were hiding near the Sacred Heart Palace. If Yun Yang was not present, if Yun Yang's cultivation base had not advanced by leaps and bounds during this period of time, and if Emmy, the Soul Demon's natural nemesis, the consequences would have been unimaginable. Not to mention the man in green and the Soul Demon, even if there was only the power of the Phoenix Emperor, the people of the Sacred Heart Palace might not be able to withstand it. Fortunately, the unexpected presence of Yun Yang had changed the outcome of their inevitable death. From Yun Yang's perspective, if not for his unexpected appearance, the Phoenix Emperor's plan would have been fruitful. Even if the Sacred Heart Palace had hidden high-end combat power, it might not be enough to deal with it. After all, even Yun Yang felt a lingering fear when he recalled the earth-shattering blow left behind by the Phoenix Emperor. This reminded Yun Yang of a sentence the Phoenix Emperor had said. This was the chosen one, this was a variable. This was the child of destiny. Yun Yang looked in the mirror and murmured, Is it true? There was nothing else along the way, except for Shangguan Lingxiu forcing Yun Yang to take off his hood every night and reveal his fox head to observe. Every time this happened, she would smile exceptionally happily. Yun Yang could not help but feel depressed. Even if this young master's current appearance is a bit strange. But this is still my head, not your toy, ah. However, Shangguan Lingxiu did not care about this at all. Her own happiness was the most important thing. Yun Yang had no choice but to propose an exchange of conditions. You look at mine, so it's only natural for me to look at yours, right? Let's take turns and look at each other. Unexpectedly, Shangguan Lingxiu disagreed and rejected it on the spot. As long as you're still wearing this fox head, you can't touch me no matter what. I can't touch anywhere. Shangguan Lingxiu's attitude was very firm. Yun Yang stared at her helplessly and could only sigh at the sky. He used his own head to coax his wife every day, making her smile. However, he could not do anything he wanted to. This was one of the world's greatest tragedies. Yun Yang knew very well that despite the fact that he had 2 fiancées in name and that each of them was as beautiful as a flower, captivating even birds, there was one thing he was sure of. As long as these 2 women were together, he would be more miserable than a bachelor. He would not be able to eat either one of them. This was the tacit understanding between the 2 women. It was more like a competition between the 2 women. Therefore, if he wanted to break this stalemate, He could only seize the opportunity when the two women were separated to try and devour one of them first. As long as he succeeded, it would mean that he had broken through this alliance. Comparing the two, it was obvious that Xueqi could not be devoured. He did not know who was the one who had cast the divine light barrier back then. What kind of crazy daughter complex was it to protect his daughter so well and have such an insane cultivation base? It was obvious that he wanted to protect his daughter to the point where Xueqi could not even find a husband. It was only because he had a good temper that he was able to resist being thrown around. Thinking about it, perhaps the one who could be devoured now was Lingxiu. This was a heaven-sent opportunity that would not come again if he missed it. Yun Yang's plan was well thought out, but he did not expect Lingxiu to be so stubborn. She was not willing to spit anything out, not even willing to show her face. Yun Yang was utterly disappointed, even feeling tired when he walked. In spite of this, Yun Yang felt that Lingxiu's personality seemed to have changed a little when they met again. She was much livelier than before, with hints of a young girl's liveliness. Leaving the Tianxian continent, leaving the Shangguan family of generals that had almost crushed Lingxiu to death with their heavy honor, Lingxiu felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted off her shoulders. She was a young girl of her actual age, exceptionally charming. Yun Yang had tried multiple times, but Lingxiu had been guarding against him like a thief. Finally, he gave up on the idea. "It's all yours anyway." Lingxiu blushed. "But wearing this fox's head, I feel disgusted." Disgusted. All right. You're right. I'll admit it." Yun Yang could only give up completely in order not to disgust his fiancée. However, at the very next moment, "Yun Yang, take off your mask and let me touch it. It's so fun. I feel like I'm a little addicted to it." Yun Yang was exasperated. "Aren't you disgusted by this fox's head? What the hell are you addicted to?" Sigh. Yun Yang was upset, instinctively hastening his steps. Then, on the way back, there was only one encounter. It could be considered as an extremely melodramatic matter. This sudden visit had surprised Yun Yang. When Yun Yang and Xueqi had stopped by a town to have a bite to eat, they had encountered the most common, cliched, and melodramatic plot. Both of them had encountered a popinjay, a fellow who had come to provoke Lingxiu because of her beauty. The turn of events almost made Yun Yang laugh in exasperation. "How dare you provoke this lady in front of you? What courage do you have? She's a ruthless character who can crush even a Saint Lord's rash actions in an instant. How dare a popinjay like you covet her? You've probably never died before." Without another word, Yun Yang sent the fellow flying with a slap. Of course, he had not killed him. He had failed to see the bigger picture and had committed his own suicide. Although he had no one to blame, Yun Yang was unexpectedly a little merciful. He did not use his true strength, but the slap had allowed this popinjay young master to experience the feeling of flying in the air. "Send someone to fetch your young master 2,000 miles away." Yun Yang snorted and strode away. He was not exaggerating. The slap had sent the young master flying at least 2,000 miles in the air. After all, he was already a Saint Lord who was close to the level of a demigod. Moving mountains and seas was a piece of cake for him. Sending someone flying a little distance was nothing. "Aren't you being too mischievous?" Lingxiu could not help but laugh. He was just a little flippant, but he didn't go overboard. At least, he didn't really kidnap you, but you sent him flying 2,000 miles away. This doesn't match your identity as a Saint Lord, the bound of universe. Yun Yang's expression was somber as he said, "Don't you think I'm actually doing a good deed? With this fellow's talent, he won't be able to cultivate to the point of flying even if he were to enter the Tao immediately. This time, I've given him a free try. To him, his life is considered complete, not to mention that he's a Saint Lord like me, the bound of universe's supreme cloud, serving him. Not only is his life complete, he can die without regrets." Lingxiu was flushed with laughter. How could she say it like that? To prevent something like this from happening again, the two of them flew in the air. With the help of Yun Yang's endless spiritual medicine, Lingxiu's cultivation base grew at a terrifying rate. In just 5 to 6 days, she had risen from the 3rd level of Saint Lord to the pinnacle of the 4th level. She was only a step away from breaking through. The speed almost scared Yun Yang to death. He could break through quickly because of the uniqueness of his endless divine art. What was Lingxiu's? If the progress was too fast and the range was too large, it would be too easy for her to go berserk and produce flaws in her cultivation. It would not be beneficial in the future, but a hidden danger. I have a lot of spiritual fruits given to me by my grandmaster and the pure spiritual spirit sealed in my body by my master. My master used the heaven-seizing method to forge my meridians into primordial spiritual meridians. As long as I'm stimulated by the spiritual force, I can advance rapidly, Shangguan Lingxiu explained. According to master, there's no problem breaking through to the pinnacle of the 4th level of Saint Lord. There won't be any hidden danger. Yun Yang was speechless. No problem breaking through to the pinnacle of the 4th level of Saint Lord. No hidden danger. These words made Yun Yang doubt his life. What kind of god was this master? Why couldn't he meet a master like this? Although the two of them flew in the air, untainted by the mortal world, they traveled extremely slowly. It was as if they were on a leisurely tour. Naturally, he did not know that the entire bound of universe had undergone an earth-shattering change right now. The bound of universe's supreme cloud had slaughtered hundreds of Saint Lords in 3 days' time. The news spread like the wind across the world. Saint Lords. Hundreds of Saint Lords? The shocking nature of this news made everyone feel as if they were in a dream. They couldn't believe it. After all, most of the lower-level martial artists in the bound of universe did not even know what level a Saint Lord was. Such a high level of cultivation was not something they could come into contact with. They had not even heard of it in legends. To these people, not to mention a Saint Monarch, even a Saint Emperor was basically the highest level of existence that they could come into contact with in the legends. Now, even the high and mighty immortals and sages had fallen in one go, and they had all died in the hands of a single person in less than 3 days. Lord Supreme Cloud is invincible. No one knew where this sentence came from, but in just a few days, it had become the consensus of the world. As the news spread, the residents of 9 Supremes became even more popular. Then, the Sacred Heart Palace spread the news. Lord Supreme Cloud passed by the Sacred Heart Palace and with his keen eyes, personally captured Lei Qianli, the demon clan spy who had been lurking in the Sacred Heart Palace for many years. He also captured and killed him, ruining the demon clan's tens of thousands of years' plan in the bound of universe. Lord Supreme Cloud's reputation soared once again after this explosive news, soaring to a shocking level. It could be said that it was unprecedented. After all, before this, there really wasn't a single high-level martial artist whose name was known by the whole world. Lord Supreme Cloud's emergence as the bound of universe's hero, coupled with his subsequent achievements, made him even more extraordinary. Only Shi Wuchen, Qian Duo, and the other elders of the residents of 9 Supremes sighed inwardly. This Lord Supreme Cloud was the infamous raiders of all but heaven. The sky was 9 feet high, and the feathers of a swallow could be plucked from it. Now that he had reached such a height, how could they explain it? The General Commerce League, who felt that they had frequent dealings with the residents of 9 Supremes, felt like they were in a dream. When Yun Yang transformed into the raiders of all but heaven, almost everyone in the General Commerce League's upper echelons knew about it. The General Commerce League itself was the one who disposed of stolen goods. How long ago was that? At that time, Yun Yang was at an absolute disadvantage, and their abilities were at least 1,000 times weaker. Now the General Commerce League, who had successfully risen to a first-class celestial luck banner, had planned to settle down for a period of time and consolidate its strength. When it was completely stable, it would look for sect leader Yun to exchange some treasures from the spirit's grave. Who would have thought that before the plan could be implemented, sect leader Yun would suddenly transform into the bound of universe's hero? Not only that, but sect leader Yun had suddenly become a peak 4th-class Saint King expert, which meant that his ability was directly above the General Commerce League. The residents of 9 Supremes had also risen to become a sect with an upper-class celestial luck banner. News that shocked the General Commerce League came one after another. Chapter 1395. The General Commerce League was utterly astounded. Supreme Cloud had single-handedly killed 100 Saint Emperors, all of whom were high-class Saint Emperors. Today, the residents of 9 Supremes was growing stronger by the day, with hundreds of people breaking through to the next level almost every day. A behemoth was emerging out of nowhere and was slowly rising. If his estimation was correct, it was only a matter of time before the residents of 9 Supremes replaced the Sacred Heart Palace to become the Palace of 9 Supremes. Even though its overall ability was still lacking, the residents of 9 Supremes' foundation and actual ability might not be inferior to the East Celestial Palace once it met the standard. And this time definitely wouldn't be too long. Xiao Wui had thought that he would look at the residents of Nine Supremes in a different light after 3 days of absence, but facing the rapidly growing residents of Nine Supremes, the General Commerce League's leader felt that a day apart felt like 3 years had passed. Moreover, the residents of Nine Supremes' existence had completely affected the General Commerce League. On this day, Chief Xiao summoned Lang Fantian and the others for a meeting. Most of them were the General Commerce League's higher-ups, such as Song Chonggong and the others. Even Feng Guohai, who was not qualified to attend, had risen in status to the League's higher echelon because he was the first member of the General Commerce League to establish ties with the residents of Nine Supremes. There were 30 to 40 people seated in the hall, all of whom were the League's true higher-ups. They were all extraordinary experts as far as the eye could see. There were 27 to 28 experts who had attained the rank of Supreme Saint. It was obvious that the General Commerce League's overall ability had grown tremendously after establishing a relationship with the residents of Nine Supremes, especially after several transactions in the Spirit's Grave. The number of Supreme Saint experts alone was not only enough to secure the last position of the upper-class Celestial Luck Banner, they even had the strength to advance. The theme of this meeting is to discuss what we should do about the residents of Nine Supremes in the future. Please speak freely. We're all family, there's no need to hold back. Xiao Wui pinched his brows with his fingers, looking like he was having a headache. Lang Fantian coughed and scanned everyone's faces, hesitating to speak. After a while he said after some deliberation, Lord Supreme Cloud of the residents of Nine Supremes is the hero of the bound of universe, so naturally, the residents of Nine Supremes' status will rise accordingly. Of course, the residents of Nine Supremes' current comprehensive capability is also worthy of its current reputation. Actually, there's not much to be said about today's topic. After all, the residents of Nine Supremes' Lord Supreme Cloud is very close to us. As long as it can be maintained as before. As he spoke, Lang Fantian stopped talking abruptly as if he had thought of something. Xiao Wui scolded angrily. What's the difference between what you said and farting? Who didn't know this? Do I need you to say that? Who doesn't know that we need to maintain a friendly relationship? The problem now is, how can this friendly relationship be maintained? Do you know what price we have to pay to maintain this relationship? How long can we maintain this relationship with our wealth? Lang Fantian coughed and said, As the deputy chief, I think I have a good personal relationship with Lord Supreme Cloud. I've always been more friendly to the residents of Nine Supremes. Everyone knows this, so it's not hard to understand what I'm saying. Forget it. I'd better shut up. The less I speak, the less mistakes I make. Xiao Wui snorted, then sighed and said, I believe that none of you would have thought that the residents of Nine Supremes, which was just established not long ago and was no stronger than an ant, would actually become a behemoth that could command the world in such a short period of time. It has even leaped to become a titan that can completely suppress the Commerce League. The hall was silent. Both Song Chonggong and Li Yisin were indebted to the residents of Nine Supremes, so they followed Lang Fantian's example and kept quiet for a moment. Speaking of which, Song Chonggong, Li Yisin, Lang Fantian, and Feng Guohai could be considered the residents of Nine Supremes' loyal fans. All these years, they were gratified by every achievement the residents of Nine Supremes had achieved, and it was common for them to boast about it everywhere. Saying things like, I did it all those years ago, had almost become a catchphrase that was boasted over and over again, drawing criticism from others. Now, however, the residents of Nine Supremes had grown rapidly in a short period of time and risen in power, leaping from a middle-class sect to an upper-class sect, its aura and sharpness approaching the newly ascended Celestial Luck Banner School. The General Commerce League status, however, dared not boast about it anymore. Logically, the General Commerce League, with its vast assets and the elevation to an upper-class Celestial Luck Banner School, would only have more resources and greater influence. However, under the contrast of the residents of Nine Supremes' powerful rise, the General Commerce League, which was supposed to shine brightly, lost its luster. Recently, the caravans belonging to the residents of Nine Supremes had intercepted the General Commerce League's business dozens of times, whether intentionally or unintentionally, under little fatty Chen Duoduo's operation. It could be said that the General Commerce League had suffered significant losses. It was almost as if the residents of Nine Supremes' caravans had swept tens of millions of miles in a short period of time, reaching everywhere. With the residents of Nine Supremes' sudden rise as the vanguard and the continent's heroic sex as the rallying cry, the General Commerce League was almost pushed to the side. It was the same thing, the same price, but with the addition of Supreme Cloud's sect, people went to buy the residents of Nine Supremes' goods. What could they do if they did not buy from the General Commerce League? Even if the Residence of Nine Supremes was sold at a higher price, most of the buyers would still choose to buy it. Was there any logic to it? The people of the General Commerce League thought it was ridiculous, but the buyers all had something to say. Lord Supreme Cloud has risked his life for mankind, and we've been blessed by him. We're buying the Residence of Nine Supremes goods to help the Residence of Nine Supremes earn more money. We're doing our part, so there's nothing to say. No one knew when such a theory had started, but it had spread throughout the continent in a short time, ingrained in people's hearts, and put into practice. The Residence of Nine Supremes caravans had certainly benefited, but it had also caused most of the General Commerce League's goods to be stored in the warehouse. They could not be sold. Even if the quality of the goods was good and the price was low, what could they do if there were no buyers? Ever since the Residence of Nine Supremes was officially promoted to an upper-class celestial luck banner sect, the caravans belonging to the Residence of Nine Supremes were like a prairie fire, blossoming everywhere and opening branches everywhere. Even Lone Bamboo City, the General Commerce League's base camp, where no other merchants dared to set up shop except for the General Commerce League's own shops, the branches of the Residence of Nine Supremes were still opened unscrupulously, and their business was booming, surpassing the General Commerce League's headquarters. Xiao Wui's face was dark as he listened to the General Commerce League's chief shopkeeper's report. It had been a quarter of an hour, but the report was not finished. It was all about losses, requests for help, and everything was not going well. All right. That's the situation now. Xiao Wui frowned and said, even Lone Bamboo City is doing so poorly, let alone other places. For the General Commerce League, it's no longer a matter of earning more or not, but a matter of whether they will starve to death. Everyone, speak freely. It's a matter of life and death for the General Commerce League now. Don't hide it anymore. The shopkeeper hesitated for a moment and coughed, but he was the first to speak. I've been presiding over the auction business in Lone Bamboo City, and I've had the most thoughts. In the past, our auction house could be said to be the first in the entire bound of universe, and the reputation of being free of responsibility was even more well known. But recently, things are no longer as good as before. What bothers me the most is that there's a disciple in the Residence of Nine Supremes who has no bottom line. This person's name is Hu Xiaofan, and he has the title of Purple Chi from the East. It's said that he gave it to himself. I don't know what's wrong with this fellow, but his calligraphy is so nonsensical that it's like a dog crawling on the ground. Yet, he wrote a stack of dozens of feet thick and entrusted it to us for auction. The General Commerce League's auction house has the tradition of being free of responsibility, so it's inconvenient for us to reject him. It's not a big deal as it's common for items to go unsold, but this child insisted on collecting the money first. He said that he didn't have enough cultivation resources and needed to buy it, and even said that he wouldn't seek revenge even if we auctioned more in the future. How could his subordinates agree to such an empty deal? He drew his sword against them. Although he only asked for 2 lower-class spiritual jade pieces for each piece of calligraphy, it's not much. Even if this child brought tens of thousands of pieces of calligraphy and paintings, it wouldn't be worth much. Still, it's clearly trash that won't be auctioned off no matter how long it takes. Pfft, Lang Fantion could not help but spit. Then, he noticed that everyone in the hall was looking at him in dissatisfaction, their gazes hostile. Why are you so happy to see the Residence of Nine Supremes disciple bullying the General Commerce League? What do you want? Whose side are you on? The General Commerce League's losses have been increasing recently. If this goes on, we won't even be able to get everyone's cultivation resources soon, let alone maintaining our current upper-class celestial luck banner sect. When the inventory is completely depleted, the General Commerce League will disband and everyone will go their separate ways. I really don't know if everyone will be reduced to robbing and occupying the mountains. Xiao Wui's head throbbed. He had long wanted to talk to someone about this, but Supreme Cloud, who was in charge of the Residence of Nine Supremes, was not at home. When he found Shi Wuchen, the latter looked helpless. I'm the second Supreme, but I'm actually just a peak leader. I don't have the authority to manage these matters. When he found the other members of the Demiurge Flawed 10, they looked helpless as well. If even Shi Wuchen can't manage this, it's even more useless to look for us. You have to look for Boss, or all of you can look for Qian Duo to mediate. When he found Qian Duo, the major domo of the Residence of Nine Supremes, little Fatty looked indignant. My subordinates are too reckless and unbecoming. How can this be? I'll investigate this thoroughly and not let it go unjustly. Then, Qian Duo really went to investigate and not let it go unjustly. In spite of this, the residents of Nine Supremes caravans did not restrain themselves after the investigation. Instead, they became even more aggressive. Hu Xiaofan, for example, was rumored to have been severely reprimanded by Qian Duo and had his cultivation resources reduced for a year. Now, Hu Xiaofan was enraged. He brought over the calligraphy and paintings of his seniors and juniors, pulling over a dozen carts and announcing that he was going to auction them at the General Commerce League. There were tens of millions of them, and each of them had 2 pieces of inferior-grade spiritual jade. That was almost 200 million inferior-grade spiritual jade pieces. Even if the General Commerce League was at its peak, 200 million inferior-grade spiritual jade pieces was a huge sum of money to throw away. What was more, the current situation was such that the General Commerce League was on the verge of breaking down. Feng Guohai coughed and chuckled. He's indeed the direct disciple of the Raiders of All But God. This style, this character, this way of doing things. He's definitely a direct disciple. I'm speechless. Another deputy chief gave him a sideways glance and said, "Can you stop mentioning the Raiders of All But God's name in the future? Also, the black and white ruthless duo, the 9 feet higher sky, the swallow plucking feathers, and all these other things. I feel suffocated just listening to them." This reputed one attended a banquet last time and accidentally mentioned that Lord Supreme Cloud was the Raiders of All But God back then. He did many ridiculous things back then. I swear to heaven and earth, I only mentioned it for fun. I didn't mean to target him, but there were dozens of King people who wanted to beat me up. They said that I've tarnished Lord Supreme Cloud's reputation and slandered him, that I must be a demon spy, a scum of the human world. Even now, there are still dual letters being sent here. I've received hundreds of them now, all of them wanting to clear Lord Supreme Cloud's name. This old man doesn't even dare to step out now. Ha ha ha. Even at such a gloomy time, the group who heard him guffawed. The vice chief grew even more frustrated, at a loss for words. You guys are still laughing. Fine, laugh all you want. So what if I'm willing to be a coward? The challengers are only blocking the General Commerce League's door with their swords anyway. Out of sight, out of mind. As long as you guys don't find it annoying. Lang Fanti unrolled his eyes and said, Hey T, who asked you to be so talkative? It's what you should do to be a coward. What's the point of letting it go? The vice chief was enraged. Weren't all of you laughing happily just now? Continue laughing. Why aren't you laughing anymore? Then I wish you a long life. Lang Fantian's words stupefied the vice chief, almost choking him to death. CK. Is he calling me a 10,000-year-old tortoise? In spite of this, who could he blame? He could only blame himself for being talkative. With Supreme Cloud's reputation that was like the sun in the sky and his righteous image that surpassed all the sages of the past and present, anyone who spoke ill of Supreme Cloud outside would be more severe than poking a hornet's nest. Raiders of All But God? Bull T. How dare you compare Lord Supreme Cloud to those villains who have ulcers on their heads and pus from the soles of their feet? That Raiders of All But God doesn't even have the right to lick Lord Supreme Cloud's boots. It's already come to this. And all of you are still in the mood to laugh. Can't you say something positive? Xiao Wui wanted to sigh. Tell us what we should do. The vice chief, who looked like an aggrieved wife, said, There are only 2 paths before us. The first is to wage war with the residents of 9 Supremes and reclaim our trade route, our interests. The others shook their heads. Nonsense. It's your King choice if you want to die. Don't drag us into it. Wage war with the residents of 9 Supremes. This is no longer a joke. It's a death wish. Haven't you experienced it yourself? You've only said something outside and you've received so many challenge letters. You still want to wage war? That's asking for the General Commerce League's death. The second path is to endure and wait for death. The vice chief chuckled humorlessly. There are only these 2 paths. What else is there to discuss? The bigger the fist, the bigger the reason. This has always been the bound of universe's unchanging truth. The residents of 9 Supremes is thriving while we're relatively weak. Do you think they'll give up the trade route to us just because the General Commerce League wants to live? Don't entertain such fantasies. The cruelty of business competition has never paled in comparison to a real fight. It's been like this since ancient times. Even if we take a step back, if the residence of 9 Supremes really wants to let us earn some money and live on, where would all of our dignity go? Wouldn't we be begging for food? Why don't we just disband? Chapter 1396. The Vice Chief's words made everyone blush as the room filled with silence. After a moment of silence, Xiao Wui stared at Lang Fantian and blinked, asking in a low voice, "Vice Chief Lang, what do you think?" Lang Fantian lifted his head to look at his boss, the corner of his lips twitching. "What do I mean? I don't mean anything. What do you want me to say? Give me a hint. Then I won't know anything. Especially not what you're thinking. What can I say?" Xiao Wui continued to ask, looking at Lang Fantian. "Vice Chief Lang, just speak your mind. Speak your mind. You can say anything." Lang Fantian saw a hint of encouragement flash across Xiao Wui's eyes. What's going on? Am I seeing things? Lang Fantian mumbled to himself. "If I've misunderstood, I might be beaten to death on the spot." Coughing, Lang Fantian sneaked a peek at Xiao Wui's expression. The latter was solemn, indescribably stern. He swallowed again and asked tentatively, "Boss, may I ask, what's your cultivation base now?" Xiao Wui was serious. "I'm only at the pinnacle of 4th grade Holy Venerate. I'm one step away from ascending to 1st grade Holy Lord." Lang Fantian nodded and deliberated, his eyes sneakily scanning Xiao Wui's expression as he said, "Boss's cultivation base has always been the highest in the league. The others, including Elder Li and the others, aren't as good as you." Xiao Wui narrowed his eyes. "However, according to what I know, Lord Supreme Cloud is already a 4th grade Holy Lord now. Shi Wuchen and the others are 4th grade Holy Venerates as well. Oh, the residence of 9 Supremes has about a dozen 4th grade Holy Venerates now." Xiao Wui glared at Lang Fantian and asked in a low voice, "What are you trying to say?" Lang Fantian coughed and said, "What I'm trying to say is, the residence of 9 Supremes is said to be merging with the residence of 9 Supremes. There will be more than 20 Holy Venerate cultivators in the residence of 9 Supremes. It seems like the 2 leaders of the residence of 9 Supremes are not only beautiful, their cultivation base is astonishing as well. With the record of instantly killing a Holy Lord, their cultivation base must be at least a Holy Lord." Xiao Wui's face darkened. "Can't you just say what you want?" Lang Fantian went straight to the tunnel. "I actually wanted to say that even if we really fought, we wouldn't be able to defeat the residence of 9 Supremes." "I don't need you to tell me that." Everyone rolled their eyes. Wouldn't it be better if they fought too early? Was there a need to be so aggrieved? The second option is to eat away the resources and linger on with one's last breath. It's really not the way to go. Lang Fantian looked at everyone's expression before sneaking a peek at Xiao Wui's. He made up his mind and said, "In my opinion, there might not only be 2 options. There's a third option." "What's the third choice?" everyone asked in unison. Lang Fantian sucked in a deep breath. "As for the third option, the residence of 9 Supreme's growth process since its inception is right before our eyes. At least, I think that the residence of 9 Supreme's development is extraordinarily swift and unstoppable. It's only been 3 to 5 years, from a small shrimp without a celestial luck banner to a first-class sect. Moreover, the residence of 9 Supreme's higher-ups are now filled with holy emperors, far exceeding the standard of a first-class sect. I believe that the residence of 9 Supreme's next step is to plan for the Palace of 9 Supremes." The group nodded in agreement. Xiao Wui's gaze was slightly stunned. "Even if we're only trying to survive now, it's already difficult for us to move forward." The group nodded again. Xiao Wui's gaze was still stunned. Lang Fantian said, I think if the residence of 9 Supremes continues to develop, it's not impossible for it to reach the height of the palace. Of course, this is only my guess." The group nodded again. Xiao Wui's frown deepened. Lang Fantian said, "I'm thinking, should we all join the residence of 9 Supremes since we're on good terms before it's fully developed? While the residence of 9 Supremes' development is unstoppable, its foundation is still lacking. There's 1,000 things waiting to be done. If we go there now, it'll be a timely help. On the other hand, when the residence of 9 Supremes is upgraded in another year and a half, our affiliation might not even be the icing on the cake. We're all smart people. We know that it's 2 entirely different meanings." The group was deep in thought as they nodded slowly. For a moment, Lang Fantian felt that the unity of will was an impregnable stronghold. He continued, Although our trade routes have been seized and we can't get our goods, it's hard for us to manage. While the residence of 9 Supremes is expanding everywhere, it still lacks a foundation and an overall plan. It's hard for us to carry out orders and prohibitions. It's a mess. We can be responsible for this when we go there and help the residents of 9 Supremes in the business aspect. We can make the best use of our manpower. When they've really straightened things out, it'll be meaningless for us to go there. Qian Duo of the residence of 9 Supremes is a rare business genius, but he'll still need a considerable amount of time to straighten everything out. Our participation can make up for his lack. On the other hand, he's a genius indeed. He can handle it without us. It's just that he'll need more time. The group nodded, agreeing with Lang Fontian's logic. To the General Commerce League, the threat posed by the residents of 9 Supremes was not fatal, no matter how powerful they were. Qian Duo, on the other hand, was a lethal threat. That fellow was a rare prodigy in the field of business. He was always trying to curry favor with others, and he would find every opportunity to do so. If this fellow's talent in cultivation was half as good as his talent in business, he would probably become a saint monarch. So, Lang Fantian decided when he saw that there was no objection. From what I can see, we have a close relationship with Supreme Cloud. If we seek refuge there when Supreme Cloud has just risen and still remembers our old friendship, we'll definitely be entrusted with an important position. If we wait a little longer, when the residents of 9 Supreme's position has stabilized and the number of experts has increased, the trade route is smooth and unhindered, we'll really be living under someone else's roof. Even if we have something to eat, it'll only be leftovers from someone else's charity. The group was silent for a moment before they nodded. They thought that what Lang Fantian said was harsh, but it was the truth and it was all for the sake of the League's future. Only Xiao Wui looked at Lang Fantian in shock. What nonsense is this fellow spouting? Did I ask you to say this? Did I ask you to say this? Isn't this a bastard? I asked you to voice your opinion. What King opinion is this? Are you obviously going to hand over the General Commerce League to someone else? Are you telling everyone so blatantly that we'll be nothing if we're late and that we should go earlier? The Vice Chief nodded and said, Vice Chief Lang's words are crude, but they're reasonable. If we go there, not only will the cultivation resources and spiritual qi be better than before, but when the residence of 9 Supremes becomes the Palace of 9 Supremes and the Palace of 9 Supremes, the League might just become a kingdom. Song Chonggong said, well said. The residence of 9 Supremes has many disciples, but when it comes to the higher-ups, there are only a few of them. When we really become members of the residence of 9 Supremes, the mystical spirit's grave alone will guarantee everyone's safety and lifespan. I'm in favor of going there. Another high official agreed. That's right. Vice Chief Lang's action has found us a great way out. Like what Vice Chief Lang said, we'll still be valued if we go there now, but it might not be the case after some time. That's right, that's right. This is a great idea indeed, someone else agreed. Why don't we just settle this then? The crowd said in unison. Following that, the discussion was in full swing. No one noticed that Chief Xiao Wui's expression was darkening. There were 45 people in the hall. Other than Xiao Wui, the other 44 had voted in favor of going to the residence of 9 Supremes. Their faces were flushed with excitement, their eyes glinting. Most of them were already thinking about what they should do after joining the residence of 9 Supremes. We have to unleash our strengths. We have to show off our unique abilities. We have to. But in terms of relationship, Vice Chief Lang is still closer to Lord Supreme Cloud. Ha. That's right, that's right. I'm so happy about this. Ha. Lang Fantian narrowed his eyes and said proudly, what do you guys think? Ha. Vice Chief Lang has great foresight. You're the meritorious minister of the Commerce League. We're ashamed of our inferiority. Boss, what do you think? It was only then that Lang Fantian remembered Xiao Wui and was shocked when he turned to look at him. Xiao Wui's expression was dark as if he had just eaten *T. Boss. Lang Fantian stuttered. You didn't mean that? Then the look you gave me just now. You gave me a hint. Xiao Wui panted heavily, already feeling suffocated. He struggled to catch his breath and stared at Lang Fantian with his bell-like eyes, unable to speak for a moment. There was only one thought in his mind. Strangle him to death? Strangle him to death. Song Chonggong laughed. Boss is surprised and comforted. He's so happy that he can't even speak. Yes, yes. Boss will definitely agree to anything that's good for the Commerce League. The crowd agreed. Boss. Lang Fantion paled as he asked carefully. What do you think? Xiao Wui panted heavily and gulped, chuckling dryly. Everyone has agreed. Why wouldn't I? This is a suggestion that's good for the league. Why wouldn't I accept it? The crowd cheered. Xiao Wui stood up. It's decided for now. Let's disperse. Lang Fantion, come. I'll discuss the follow-up with you. The latter part of his sentence was uttered through gritted teeth. Lang Fantion felt a chill run down his spine. He sat on the chair tightly and said dryly, Boss, this is... Let's go. Xiao Wui grabbed Lang Fantion from the chair and vanished with a swoosh. In the secret chamber. Lang Fantion's inhuman cries were earth-shattering and endless, rising and falling in an orderly manner. Pow, 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 pow. Xiao Wui punched and kicked, his fists landing on flesh and his feet on bone. Did I ask you to say this? You be asterisk starred. Did you F asterisk king see my mouth? I'm talking to you about collaboration. Do you know what collaboration means? Your F asterisk king mouth is giving the General Commerce League to the residents of 9 Supremes. Do you know that? The most infuriating thing is that all of them actually agreed to it and passed it. Xiao Wui sighed at the sky as he spoke. I've never been versed in such matters. Why didn't you tell me about the collaboration through telepathy then? You asked me to speak my mind. Of course I have to speak my mind. Lang Fantion was indignant as he grumbled with bloodshot eyes. How dare you talk back? I'm asking you to speak because I'm afraid of embarrassing myself. I'm the General Commerce League's chief. What's wrong with being a little reserved? Can't I have some dignity? Asking you, the deputy chief, to seek a collaboration with someone else is giving them face and preserving some of mine at the same time. Isn't this the best of both worlds? Xiao Wui bellowed weakly. Why are there only 2 paths of war and perseverance when we're faced with a predicament? Can't we work together other than seeking refuge? Do you know what collaboration is? Do you understand? Xiao Wui grew more resentful as he punched and kicked harder, causing Lang Fantion to wail and fly around like a rubber ball. From the rise and fall of his voice to the rise and fall of his physical body, it was a picturesque scene. After a long time, Xiao Wui was finally done venting. Boss, I was wrong. I misunderstood your intention. Lang Fantion's face was bruised and swollen, looking remorseful. But it's not too late now. Only our family knows about seeking refuge. I'll tell them later. My previous suggestion doesn't count. We can't seek refuge, we have to work together. Don't worry, your dignity can still be preserved. I'm thick-skinned, it's fine. In spite of this, Xiao Wui fell silent when he heard what Lang Fantion said, speechless. After a long time, he stood up and turned around to look at the wall. Finally he sighed softly and said, There's no need. Lang Fantion looked puzzled. Xiao Wui sighed in melancholy. You're the only fool in the league. The others are smart. The General Commerce League's people are gathered in one place because of the league's wealth. We're a team of people. Perhaps we're weaker than the orthodox upper-class celestial luck banner sects in terms of martial arts cultivation base and combat strength. But when it comes to scheming, we're not inferior to anyone or any force. If we don't have considerable knowledge and foresight for our entire lives, how can we achieve what we have today? Looking at the current situation, seeking refuge is really the only way out. The so-called cooperation must be built on the basis that both parties can reach a consensus and be wary of each other, taking what they need and benefiting from it. The residents of 9 Supreme's shortcomings are obvious, but they insist on the manpower of our Commerce League. On the other hand, our league is struggling to survive and is in a precarious situation. It's difficult for both parties to balance their needs, so the so-called cooperation is just an illusion. Even if the residents of 9 Supremes agrees to cooperate for the sake of old ties, the league will still inevitably be at the mercy of others. Once there are more conflicts, the league will inevitably be swallowed by them. Instead of that, it's better to lower our attitude from the beginning and pledge our allegiance to them. We'll gain a better impression and a considerable middle-level authority. It's not a bad idea. Those people have long seen the reason clearly. To us, this is the only way to solve the problem once and for all. Not only can everyone's benefits be protected, there's even hope for us to advance further. With the residents of 9 Supreme's trend, everyone's status will rise in the future. It's foreseeable. Such a simple logic. Don't tell me you think they've only thought of those two ways? Xiao Wui sighed. The General Commerce League's people have lost their will. What more can I say? Lang Fantian was stunned. This? Xiao Wui glanced at him and said faintly. Do you understand now? Everyone in the League will benefit from seeking refuge with the residents of 9 Supremes. I'm the only one who'll suffer a loss. It's because I'm no longer the boss from now on. It's because of this reason that they dare not mention it and are too embarrassed to do so. After all, we've been in the same boat for so many years. They'll still leave me some dignity. Sigh, I'm not a good person either. I've hoped that someone would suggest a way to continue my precarious position as the League's leader. I know it's a fool's dream, but I still hope that I could quench my thirst with poison and prolong my life. However, the matter has been fermenting. I've waited with them, waited for a simple-minded youth to jump out like an idiot. Then, everyone added fuel to the fire and the matter was settled. Xiao Wui glanced at Lang Fantian. Lang Fantian was livid, feeling upset as he murmured, Who's the simple-minded youth that everyone's waiting for? Xiao Wui heaved a long sigh and turned to leave, leaving behind a statement. The one I've beaten up just now. Is that simple-minded youth? Lang Fantian sat in the secret chamber in a daze, mumbling to himself after a while. Am I stupid? The next day, the General Commerce League's leader, Xiao Wui, left the League with his deputy leaders, Lang Fantian, Zhao Wuji, 5 elders, 3 high reverends, and Feng Guohai, heading to the residence of 9 Supremes. Since you've decided to kneel, kneel more thoroughly and with more sincerity, said Xiao Wui. This is also the last thing I, Xiao Wui, can do for my brothers in the General Commerce League after so many years. The residence of 9 Supremes. The residence of 9 Supremes now was vastly different from when Yunyang had left. It could be said that it had become a fairyland in the mortal realm, a paradise and a paradise. Looking from afar, the sight was filled with mountains and auspicious clouds. Countless rare birds and spiritual beasts could be vaguely seen in the air. They did not need to be in the residence of 9 Supremes. Merely standing within 10,000 miles of the residence of 9 Supremes' territory was enough to feel the abundance of spiritual qi and inexplicably comfortable. Lush greenery blotted out the sky and covered the earth. The paths were wide and broad, stretching as far as the eye could see. Yunyang and Shangguan Lingxiu turned to walking when they were about 3,000 miles away from the residence of 9 Supremes. They realized that the path ahead was extraordinarily wide and bright from here onwards. It was also from this position that flowers and plants of various colors began to be planted on both sides of the road in an orderly manner that was pleasing to the eye. Further ahead, there were strange stone decorations placed on the roadside at regular intervals. Occasionally, there were flower beds and small gardens that had their own patterns. There were even large flat rocks placed there for the tourists to rest. After a while, a few pavilions began to appear. They had a rustic and elegant vibe to them. Dozens of miles later, inns and taverns began to appear along the roadside. All sorts of merchants emerged and business was booming. After all, the residence of 9 Supremes was no longer the same as it used to be. There were too many people going there now. Countless youths' eyes were filled with longing, while many elders brought their juniors to the residence of 9 Supremes to be apprenticed to the sect. Occasionally, a disciple who wore the residence of 9 Supremes' uniform would attract admiring gazes. After all, the residence of 9 Supremes now represented honor and glory. Along the way, Shangguan Lingxiu was amazed by what she saw. The weather here is so good. Shangguan Lingxiu praised from the bottom of her heart. Compared to the residence of 9 Supremes that we've been managing for so many years. It's still a few thousand miles away, but the scenery is picturesque and the crowds are everywhere. Yunyang was dressed in purple as usual and wore a mask on his head. Although his face was concealed, he was still carefree and casual when he walked, indescribably otherworldly. Along the way, there were already too many people who were staring at them curiously. They were obviously heading to the residence of 9 Supremes. But why were they wearing masks when they were in the territory of the residence of 9 Supremes? What were they trying to do? Were they trying to provoke them? The residence of 9 Supremes' leader, Heaven Supreme, Yunyang, had an amazing battle record. First, he had escaped death many times from the demonic race and achieved unparalleled merit for the human race, earning himself the title of Heaven Supreme. Then, he had killed 100 high-level Saint Realm cultivators with his own strength. His ability was so strong that it shocked the world. The reason for the earth-shattering battle seemed to be because of the masks. Masks had become a taboo when visiting the residence of 9 Supremes recently. What about this man and woman? Both of them were wearing masks. Was this a demonstration or a provocation? At the very least, it was a little too much. Yun Yang and Shangguan Lingxiu did not exude the aura of an expert, just like two ordinary martial artists. However, they did not encounter any trouble along the way. As they continued forward, the scenery along the way grew more picturesque. Flowers and trees lined the sides of the road, while restaurants, inns, and tea houses could be found everywhere. Those who stayed or rested here were all very quiet. Even when they spoke, it was in hushed tones. No one dared to make a loud noise. It was because of this that the atmosphere was tranquil. Such a unique atmosphere excited Yun Yang and Shangguan Lingxiu. Although they were not far from the residence of 9 Supremes, both of them would stop by a restaurant, inn, or tea house every short distance to check out the local customs and take in the surrounding scenery. They realized that each inn had its own merits. It was not to the extent that they would forget to return, but staying for a few days was a pleasure. There were many beautiful sceneries around them, the inns were clean and tidy, and there were countless premium ingredients. Whether it was a place to stay or to travel, everything was wonderful. Innkeeper, I heard that this place is not far from the newly risen residence of 9 Supremes. Is it possible to open an inn here? Yun Yang asked around. If it's possible, we'd like to. Open an inn here? The innkeeper was a middle-aged man who was also a cultivator, but his cultivation base was only at the level of an honor. He said with a smile, "Dear customer, you said that this is the residence of 9 Supremes territory. How can you open an inn here? To open an inn, you must go through the residence of 9 Supremes strict inspection. Only when the residence of 9 Supremes has confirmed that you're qualified can you set up shop here. You also have to pay a year's worth of land in advance. The fee is not a small sum. Then, can it be earned back?" Not only can it be earned back. The innkeeper looked surprised. Of course, we'll only open an inn here if there's a profit to be made. There's no such thing as making a loss in a place like this. Young brother, it's not impossible if you want to do it, but you have to control your anger and be more patient. According to what I know, there are more than 10,000 merchants queuing up to open an inn now. Right, I also heard that the residence of 9 Supremes management has already decided to close this door. After all, every inch of land is worth its weight in gold. It's reasonable. Back then, I staked everything I had and moved my family here, using everything I had to buy the right to use this piece of land. It can be said to be the most far-sighted investment I've ever made in my life. Yun Yang shrugged nonchalantly. Little fatty Qian Duo really had a way of making money when it came to business. Just the prepaid fee for a year's worth of land from these inns and taverns along the thousands of miles of road would probably be enough to feed the residents of 9 Supremes for a long time. From the looks of it, the amount would probably increase even further. Those who came later, who had a lot of money in their hands, would probably have to pay 10 or 20 times more than the normal price to get a spot. How could the owners who had already opened their shops not only face increasing danger, but also sigh at the precarious situation they were in? Opening an inn here could not only earn money, but the cultivation environment was also excellent. Children would grow up here. Even if they were not gifted and could not be admitted into the residence of 9 Supremes without the opportunity, the children would still benefit greatly from being bathed in spiritual qi every day. They might not be as good as the disciples of the residence of 9 Supremes, but they might not necessarily be inferior to the disciples of other sections. This alone was an opportunity that could not be bought even if one were to go bankrupt. In addition, there was also the most crucial point: safety. Who would dare make a move here? This was the land close to the residence of 9 Supremes. The residents had even collected the land use fee, so of course, it had to provide protection to the tenants. This alone was enough to recoup the price of the ticket. Therefore, there were hundreds and thousands of people eyeing a random spot now. It would be difficult to obtain it without considerable wealth, manpower, and patience. It was not a joke. This residence of 9 Supremes really knows how to make money. Shangguan Lingxiu was amazed. She was an expert in military affairs, so naturally, she knew the importance of logistics. It was impossible for a sect like this to not become famous if the person in charge of the logistics of the residence of 9 Supremes could calculate this so clearly and use it so exquisitely. Amidst the conversation, the wind and clouds suddenly surged in the sky. Countless disciples of the residence of 9 Supremes were flying in the air. All the disciples were dressed in the same style, Only the color was different. They were hurrying in the direction of the residence of 9 Supremes. The wind whistled past. The shopkeeper raised his head and looked around. His eyes were filled with envy and confusion as he muttered, "What's going on? Why is there such a large number of people? It hasn't stopped since the day before yesterday. Every once in a while, they would come again. Even at night, they would return hurriedly. Since this morning, this is already the 7th wave. Could there have been some changes?" Before his words echoed in the air, another wave of residents of 9 Supremes disciples returned from all directions, flying over in the sky. Another wave. A shopkeeper beside him came over and said, "Old Brother Wang, this formation is unusual. It's obviously more urgent today than it was a few days ago." Yes. Could it be that something big has happened? But the residence of 9 Supremes is in the limelight right now. Who and what force dares challenge them? Wang Zhang mumbled to himself. Just then, hurried footsteps could be heard from afar. A group of low-level disciples dressed in the residence of 9 Supremes' gray and black uniforms were sprinting over from the intersection. These little fellows' cultivation base was still shallow, so they could not fly yet. They could only rely on their legs and qinggong to hurry on their way, but they ran fast nonetheless. Many of them were already drenched in sweat, but they looked excited. This is the residence of 9 Supremes summoning all their disciples back. What is it for? Yes, judging by the situation, it must be something big. There's going to be big news again. But what exactly is it that requires all the disciples to return? Everyone discussed spiritedly. Everyone was extremely curious. In the sky, there were also waves of residents of 9 Supremes disciples, some in groups of 2s and 3s, and some alone, all rushing back as if they were flying. On the ground, there were people running towards the residence of 9 Supremes mountain gate from every direction as well. Yunyang shook his head and smiled, continuing to move forward slowly with Shangguan Lingxiu, as if he was not bothered by it at all. The residents of 9 Supremes disciples are probably preparing for the ceremony to welcome you. Shangguan Lingxiu said, "Why don't you, the residents of 9 Supremes, go back quickly? It's your business if you want to be rude, but don't drag me into it." Yunyang smiled and said, "Don't worry. There are many of these little fellows out there. I think many of them have run quite far away. I know what Wuchen and the rest are thinking. If they don't come back within the stipulated time, or if they don't make it to the ceremony, they'll be in for a lot of trouble. As the saying goes, let's postpone urgent matters. Let's go there slowly, we can buy them more time." Shangguan Lingxiu laughed and said, "I didn't know that you, the residents of 9 Supremes, are so generous." Shangguan Lingxiu's tone was teasing, but her heart was filled with admiration for Yunyang's thoughtfulness. Yunyang smiled faintly and said, "I have no intention to comment on what Wuchen and the rest are doing. The discipline hall and the peak leaders have to strictly abide by the sect's rules. As for me, the residents of 9 Supremes, I have to show my generosity more often. Otherwise, the residents of 9 Supremes would be too heartless." "You're always right. How far are we from the residents of 9 Supremes?" "About 1,200 miles away." It took them 2 full days to travel the 1,200 miles before they finally arrived 30 miles away from the residence of 9 Supremes. If what they saw before was like a fairyland on Earth, this place was a fairyland on Earth. Perhaps the first 2 words could be removed, leaving only the word fairyland. The closer they got to the residence of 9 Supremes, the more magnificent the scenery became. Auspicious clouds swirled around the place, the colors of the rainbow, and the atmosphere was magnificent. There were already some spiritual herbs growing in the bushes by the side of the road. Shangguan Lingxiu even saw ginseng blooming. Dang, dang, dang. The melodious chimes of the bell echoed between the mountains, filling the air with a solemn atmosphere. There were already tens of thousands of people gathered here, waiting quietly on the surrounding mountains. Some were here to visit the mountain, some were here to run errands, and some were here to seek shelter. However, since a few days ago, the residence of 9 Supremes had closed its doors and declined all visitors. Only the disciples from the school were allowed to enter, and no one else was allowed to enter the residence of 9 Supremes. Even the disciples of the school were allowed to enter but not leave, so the outsiders had to wait outside. Everyone was naturally puzzled by this. What was the reason for this? The answer to this mystery seemed to be revealed today. The residence of 9 Supremes' bell had rung 99 times consecutively. This number was enough to indicate the severity and supremacy of this incident. Just then, a voice that shook the mountains and rivers rang out, soaring into the sky and reverberating in the 9 heavens. "Open, mountain, gate." Following the cry, the majestic gate of the residence of 9 Supremes slowly opened. A stream of spiritual chi that was so pure that it was suffocating poured out of the opened gate with a boom. The moment everyone around came into contact with the abundant spiritual chi, they felt comfortable all over, as if they had taken a sip of nectar. From head to toe, there was an indescribable comfort. The spiritual chi of the residence of 9 Supremes is really terrifying. A knowledgeable person exclaimed, "I've been to the Sacred Heart Palace before, but even the spiritual chi there is still at least a level lower than that of the residence of 9 Supremes." Xueqi, who was also waiting on the peak, sighed softly. "We're both sects with upper-class celestial luck banners, but the spiritual chi of the residence of 9 Supremes is more than 10 times better than that of the General Commerce League." The people of the General Commerce League nodded repeatedly, their faces filled with sighs, but there was still an irrepressible surprise in their eyes. As the gate opened, 100 golden-clad disciples of the residence of 9 Supremes walked out slowly with solemn faces. They were divided into 2 rows and stood neatly on both sides of the road. Their faces were respectful, and each of them looked well-behaved, polite and kind. However, when Xueqi and the others saw Hu Xiaofan, who stood second in the line, the corners of their mouths twitched and their eyes turned askew. Would anyone really believe this fellow when he put on such a well-behaved look? Yun Xiaoxin stood on the left and Bai Yeshing on the right, while Hu Xiaofan and Sun Mingxiu stood second and third respectively. They were the first-generation disciples of the residence of 9 Supremes, the most outstanding ones among the first-generation disciples. There were originally 100 first-generation disciples, but more than 30 of them had fallen for various reasons in the past few years. However, when they recruited disciples again, the number of first-generation disciples had already been replenished. When the 100 first-generation disciples stood out, countless cultivators watching from a distance gasped, their hearts filled with astonishment. Each of the youths in front of them was talented, and they were not very old. The youngest was only 13 or 14 years old, but the weakest among them had the cultivation base of a first-tier Saint Emperor. Yun Xiaoxin, Bai Yeshing, Hu Xiaofan, and the others who stood at the front, each had the cultivation base of a peak-level Saint Emperor, only half a step away from the realm of Saint Venerable. They were only waiting for the right opportunity to break through. "I can't believe the strength of the juniors of the residence of 9 Supremes is so terrifying." The corners of the mouths of countless martial artists twitched, and their hearts were almost bursting with shock.